to get through. Quite a lot of speakers registered. We'll do all the papers as thoroughly as possible, but as always, just reminded speakers, if you think somebody previously has said what you might have made, do please feel free to wave past or keep your comments concise and try not to duplicate too much. Let's get straight into the agenda. Apologies for absence. I think we have one cabinet member, Councillor David Smith, who can't be here this evening. I think that's it, isn't it? Okay. Does any cabinet member have any declaration of interest for any item that's on this evening's agenda? No. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. Minutes. We have minutes from our last meeting, which was the 17th of January. Adam, I think you wanted to raise a point.
There we go. Yep. Thank you, Chairman. As I've advised democratic services already, under section 141 of the minutes of the last meeting, it states that Councillor Adam Brown advised that having a governance framework was a requirement. In fact, I said that having a governance framework was necessary to enable us to meet our statutory requirements and other obligations. The governance framework itself isn't a requirement, and so I believe that democratic services may have already published the amended minutes, but just wanted to raise that correction.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Adam. You think that has already been reflected in the printed minutes? Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. Subject to what Adam's raised there, can I confirm agreement to the minutes? Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, have no particular chair's announcements under item 4. Not aware of any urgent business having been notified. No, our next item is always an important one, but we are going to take this later with the normal report. That's to say item 6, report from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. There is indeed one from the Chair of the Corporate Scrutiny, and it's the budget. But what we'll do is when we come to item 10, which is the budget, we will ask him then to, and we'll tidy it all up together. In which case we move first of all to the quarterly monitoring reports, and the first of quite a few reports that we got from Malcolm. So over to you for revenue monitoring Q3, Malcolm. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Right. Well, if you refer to probably the easiest way to start this off is by referring to page 17, which is the summary schedule. And what that shows is that we're forecasting as of tonight 3.9 million overspend, and that is very, very similar within a very small amount of the similar approach we took at the last quarter, which is Q2. So no real change there. Been some ups and downs along there, but we're now moving into the final quarter, and this is where typically you expect all the bits and bobs to come home and the situation to improve. So my expectation is that we will balance the books, and I think we'll do that relatively comfortably. But I'll put a caveat in this, in that I'm quite confident that I think place will improve slightly. I think adults will stay more or less the same. But the third area where it's always difficult to predict is children's, and I'm not. And bear in mind, we haven't got control over that particular budget, and so subject to that staying as it is or thereabouts, then we will end up balancing the end of the year. Now, the key point to come from this is that we've had a situation this year, this financial year, whereby we had a 4.99% increase in the council tax, and then we ended up with a finite number, therefore. But as we all know, we're all been subject to it. Inflation has taken off in these last 12 months, considerably more than 4.99. And you can all have your own views on what that number is, but it's certainly in double figures. One has been, still is probably. So therefore, we've had the problem of having a finite income, but an ever increasing costs. And so we say, right, how do you square this circle? And there's been some form from reserves, as you will well know. but the main areas come from productivity and price. Those are the areas that we've settled on. Anyway, the upshot of it is we will end up subject to that caveat, balancing the books this financial year. There's a lot of detail in the report, section by section, and I'm not proposing to go through that there. Anybody that is interested will see that for themselves. So, Chair, I'm proposing that I input this third quarter and finish on that note.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. With 3 speakers registered in the following order: first, Councillor Randall, Councillor Purser, and Councillor Harris. So, Wendy, over to you. That's got
Right,
it.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Right, okay. Thank you. Yes, you've highlighted the reasons for your underlying pressures. So one of the ones you've got is an increase in homelessness and expensive night purchase. But what are we doing about that? You know, are we looking, some councils have provided huts for hope. So, you know, I'd like to look at what sort of schemes there are around the country, and maybe we could, you know, have a look at that. There's an increase in social care demands from hospital discharges, and it says that you have difficulty recruiting staff. But when supermarkets are paying more than what we're paying care workers, I'm not surprised, because people just can't afford to live on those sort of wages. And I know we've got a budget, but in the long term, we're just going to keep going on like this. I mean, how? It just has a knock-on effect, doesn't it? You know, they're in hospital, there's not enough care workers, they can't come out of hospital, they stay in there even longer. And when eventually they do come out, their care package is far greater than it would have been if they came out earlier. So, you know, I know it's an issue, but to me, if you paid them more in the beginning, you might stop that becoming such a problem further down the road. I note that we've spent £150,000 in legal costs at SEND tribunals. But I've led to believe that over 90% of those cases are being won by parents. So, you know, this is a real problem. I understand it is difficult to recruit educational psychologists, but then they're spending a lot of their time in these tribunals where they could have been doing assessments on children. I noticed about the overspend of placements in children care. Well, a lot of that comes from family breakdowns. And in our alternative budget last year, we did put down to have £2 million to go into family hubs. Now, maybe if we do some more early preventative work, this would stop this being so expensive further on. So hopefully you will look at our alternative budget, and maybe you may take some of those things on this year. And homeschool transport. I notice on 6.45, it says that there's an increase to home to school expenditure of 0.2 million. But then on page 103, 5.58, it states that there's an increase of cost to home transport of 4.9 million. So that is quite a huge difference. So I wonder, you know, what the cost was. So if you could just have a look at that and maybe come back to me on that, please. And then also on 6.47, it's a forecast pressure of energy costs on street lighting and traffic signals. Now, we all know some years ago when we changed all the traffic lights, not traffic lights, the lampposts, and we were going to have all these energy efficient bulbs that seem to blow far quicker than any of the old bulbs do. But also, was there ever a time when, you know, we light up a whole street at certain times through the night when there's no activity, much of people walking along? And is there an opportunity to, you know, even dim some of those lights through those times in, you know, in certain streets? So thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. There'll be a few points to come back on there. Let's take our other speakers, and perhaps we can come back on all of those. So next we've got Councillor Purser. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to pick up a few things about the housing revenue budget, because although it balances, or it looks as if it's going to balance, I don't think that recognises the amount of pain involved in actually getting it to budget. And I think the Cabinet should be aware of those sorts of pressures that are there, and what the Board of NPH has to do to get there. One of the key factors this year has been inflation in material costs. That's a very significant area that we're having to face. The second area is that staff received a pay increase considerably less than the rate of inflation, and actually less than staff across WNC. So that means that we've got staff leaving either to come to WNC because WNC pays better, or going into the private sector, where housing is a very competitive. They've got skills that are very relevant to the private sector. And that affects our ability to deliver the services we want to deliver and are committed to delivering. So the report looks very tidy on paper, but actually has left the board with some very unpalatable decisions to make and painful decisions to make, with staff having a real sense of grievance, really. So that's my comments on the housing revenue account. I just want to pick up something about roads and place, because we've had a very hard winter and our roads have really taken a very serious battering. And I just wonder whether we're keeping up with the rate of attrition on our roads at the moment, and whether at the end of the year will our roads at the end of the year on average be in a better or a worse position than they were at the start of the year? Because I think we need to be monitoring whether we're keeping pace, whether our level of investment is sufficient to keep our roads at least in the state that they were. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments, Bob. We had got you actually down under item 8, which takes the HRA revenue separate. Does that cover both? Was it? Your comments were excellent. Okay, well, we might see you back in a minute then. No. Okay, brilliant. So then finally on this one, Councillor Harris, Jonathan.
Evening, councillors. A couple of points. Councillor Longley, 3.9 million with, obviously this is Q2 numbers we're looking at, but we're very few, Q3, but we're now in a situation where we're very few weeks away from the end of the financial year. You seem very confident that the 3.9 million will be brought back on track. So my question is, how will that be done? Will we see any impact or expect any impact on services between now and then? Or will we be funding it directly from general reserves, which obviously is one way to deal with it? So I wonder if you could answer that question. The concern is obviously one of those areas, as you rightly identified, the trust isn't directly within our control. So it would be interesting to understand more fully what measures are going to be put in place to bring this back in line. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. I think a few points to sweep upon that. Do you want to chip in first, Malcolm? I see a couple of colleagues do. We can go to them first and come back to you.
Fine, okay. Well, shall I cover that then, Chair? Shall I cover the points?
Yeah, do by all means. And I know Mike wants to come in and Adam as well on some of the other points raised.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, if I can deal with Jonathan's first, that's probably the easiest one to deal with. The 3.9. What happens as you go through any budgeting? You've done it yourself. You're sort of you have certain contingencies that you don't release until you know exactly where you are. And as I made the caveat before, we still have a situation of We anticipate that children will stay on track, but they may not. And as a consequence, Martin, myself have decided that we would not let these this monies go. But if we were to do so, we could balance those books. Now, providing everything stays broadly as is, we have sufficient contingencies. I'm not talking about reserves. I'm not talking about services. I'm talking about contingencies, different thing. So, and I never, by the way, Jonathan, ever use the word confident because I'm confident when the auditor signed it off. That's when I'm confident. So anyway, so that's that one. As far as the trust, we deal with them on a very regular basis, but at the end of the day, they are in charge of their own accounts, and there's in the event of them overspending, which they have done so, and there's absolutely nothing that we can do about that. It'll be what it'll be, but so therefore I keep the contingencies out until such times I know where we stand. Does that answer that question adequately for you? Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Right, go back to Bob's. Going in reverse order. Bob, HRA balance in the budget. Yeah, very well aware. It's not easy. I don't make a big thing of it, but I know very well that it's not easy, and they've had terrific inflation. Well, we all know that. I mean, it's this point I made earlier, and it's very difficult for them. And what can you do but sympathise? It is a tough business, you know. As far as the pay is concerned, I believe my understanding is that they set their own pay levels, and they should. So, you know, running any business, you've got to take all things into account, haven't you? And if you're losing your best people, that's a heavier cost than not paying them. So leave that to roads. Phil's going to talk about that later, so I'll leave that one for a moment if that's okay with you. Now, Wendy, you give me a list here. Where is she? Where's Wendy gone? Oh, there you are. Right, Wendy, give me a list here. I won't cover them all because there's just too many schemes here. I mean, for example, the schemes, there is actually a temporary accommodation scheme underway, as I understand it. So I'm just informed. So that's worth seeing what that is. But any one of these, a lot of these are not necessarily finance originated. You know, because you get to pick it up at the end when the finance is there, and you might argue. I think I cover any of these arguments. The one point I would say, when you said look at the alternative budget, always open to good ideas. I always say this every year, we haven't got a monopoly on good ideas, and if you've got any good ideas, I want to hear them. You know, stick them on an email to myself or Martin or something like that, and we would always consider them. There's no, we wouldn't blank that out for a moment. So please do. And I think Chair, I've more or less covered that and those points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Mike was going to make a couple of comments.
Technology, so we'll just picking up on Councillor Randall's comments about pay, slightly different to what Councillor Purser said. He said that people were coming here from somewhere else because our pay was better than theirs. So a bit of a conflict there in what Councillor Randall said in terms of we're not paying enough. But what's really confusing is that in this report, 1.4, I think it's the 6th bullet point, says the pay award was significantly greater than the amount included at the time of setting the budget based on the latest national pay award. Actually, it was based on the national pay award plus a quarter. So we were better than the pay award. We were better than the Living Wage Foundation recommendation at the time. This was all agreed. So I know that it's a massive challenge out there with some of the competition that we have to compete with, not just in the public sector, but third parties. That's why our pay awards always do the best that they can. They have to pass, for me, they have to pass Councillor Longley's affordability test. which this one obviously did. And the lowest paid people as a result of this pay award that was paid in Q3, the lowest paid people in this authority saw an 18% increase since vesting day. So in roughly an 18-month period, that had an 18% increase. They started on £8.91 on vesting day, and this took them up to £10.52. So it's a significant investment in some of the lowest paid people, and I think we need to re-emphasise that and show what we're doing. We'd like to do more, obviously we will, but it has to be affordable to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Adam.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to come back on the points raised by Councillor Randall and Councillor Purser, on the issue of temporary accommodation, we are in the process of procuring additional temporary accommodation and reprofiling the kind of temporary accommodation that we put people in. That's improving the efficacy of the budget that we have. On the Huts for Hope issue, I've only managed to have a very brief Google search on that. I'm sceptical. Initially, it certainly wouldn't be something that I'd like to use for temporary accommodation in the broader sense, possibly as emergency accommodation, winter shelter provision, that sort of thing. We can look further at that, but the team are picky, and rightly so, about the kind of temporary accommodation that we put people into, for no other reason than actually sometimes people are in that TA for a considerable amount of time. So we want it to be as high a standard as we can afford, somewhere that people would like to live and live for weeks, if not months, before they go into a more permanent home. Councillor Purser makes the point about the effort from MPH to balance the budget. They have gone to a huge effort. They've done remarkably well, just as we have at WNC, but they are an Almo. They cherish their independence. The question of their independence is something that opposition members highlight quite regularly to me, and rightly so. We do come to an agreement each and every year on pay provision within the HRA budget. We did that last year. It was agreed with MPH. We've done so again this year. The difference is that WNC found extra resource within the envelope of our budget to pay our staff more. It's always open to MPH to do that for themselves, but I think as we'll come to later, by taking the full 7% on offer from the government for rental increases, hopefully we've enabled MPH to offer their staff the pay settlement that they need, and I'll expand on that later.
Okay, thank you, Adam. And Phil.
Thank you, Chairman. As you've said, I'll be referring to the state of our roads when we get to item 10 and we're debating that. But just one point that Councillor Randall raised with regard to switching off or cutting down street lights, that already happens, Chairman. Street lights do reduce, dim down late at night through to the very early hours. So that's already happening, and we are saving electricity costs on that. Hopefully soon to save even more when we go to LED streetlight heads. So yeah, already happening, Chair.
That's very good. Thank you. Any other comments at all? Any other points on this? Fiona?
I just wanted to say that there was some government funding given out to councils for hubs, for family hubs for early help, which unfortunately we weren't eligible for, but we are working on quite a large programme to put in place what we can without the funding. And that is going forward now, because we do all appreciate that early help would be much beneficial to us in saving money for the future, because if we can get in touch with these families early on, they will save us money going forward, and also it will make lives better for children. Just to say also about the predicted overspend in the Children's Trust, and I say predicted because, you know, it is a prediction. I was at a conference last week where they told us, it was a conference for children in care, where they told us that the amount of children coming into care over the last year had risen all over the country by 70%. So I think that we need to take that into account when we're looking here. We always want to put the needs of the children first of all before we think about anything else. And actually in that case, we have to do the best that we can. In an emergency, we're often placing children in quite expensive accommodation to start with, because it will be something coming in on a Friday afternoon and it's a desperate need to find somewhere. But we have now put in a programme and a team of staff who are looking at these placements to see if once the child has settled, they could be moved nearer to home and in a provision that would suit them better and probably save us some funding. But that's not the main criteria for children's services. Unfortunately, we have to put the needs of the children first in everything we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Okay, any further comments at all? Questions? No, in which case then the recommendations, as always, are at section 3 of this report. They're about noting the outturn position and the associated risk. Note the deliverability assessment of West Northampton Council savings requirement for 22-23, and then delegate authority to the Executive Director. So consultation with the portfolio holder to apply any relevant budget requirements required. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to those recommendations? Is that agreed? Great, thank you very much. Takes us on to item 8, and this is the Q3 General Fund and Housing Revenue Account Capital Public Documents pack. We've 2 speakers here, again, Councillor Bob Purser and then Councillor Sally Beardsworth. But just first of all, over to Malcolm to make some introductory comments.
All a good time, Bob. Right, the best way of looking at this, I think, is that is on page 51 and 53, which is I'll read out. Table 1 says the changes to the general fund capital program since Q2 September. So in other words, these are the changes that taken place since the last time this was approved. So that's what's important, and you'll see quite a lot of changes, of some in, some out, and the general, and we run through those 2 or 3 pages of those. The key to this capital capital program, again, is the Capital and Assets Board. This is a very, very thorough approach we get to every capital item, and no matter how large or small. And the criterion is quite clear. It's a situation, if it's statutory, we no choice to get on and do it. If it's fully funded from somewhere else, grant very often, then that generally hasn't got a problem, unless there's some weird thing on it, but generally that won't be a problem. And then you've got the invest to save or productivity programs, and these are ones obviously I'm very keen on, and that's been demonstrated this current year and will be next year, we hope. And thereafter you get part funded and so on down the criteria. So that's how it's dealt with. Martin here on my right chairs it with a very strong arm. I didn't say a rod of iron. It's not quite that bad, Martin, but it's very strong. And as a consequence, the program, I think, is in good order. To say those are the changes, and I think that's the important part of it. Further on through the report, it will show what the borrowing position is, and I'm very keen on restraining our borrowing, as anybody that's dealt with us knows, and trying to keep it in line with our maturity program. So therefore, other than that, that's really the key points that come out of that. And the borrowing level that we're showing at 107 million probably won't be at that level, because we tend to put the worst case scenario and row back from that. Now, when we talk about the HRA capital, then we reprofile that pretty much every quarter based on what we think the reality of the position is and what's looking forward. So that would explain that one. At the moment, there's the difficulty is as I understand it, is actually spending that amount. So therefore, we tend to be just scorekeepers on that, as far as and we do to the best of our ability. So I think, Chair, that's pretty much all I've got to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you. That's helpful. So to take our speakers. So Councillor Purser, Bob, over to you, followed by Councillor Beardsworth.
Thank you again, Chair. I'm just beginning to understand the housing capital account, and don't wish you to go through and explain it to me this evening, but I'm learning. And I actually think the team has done a lot of reprofiling this year, and I think the hard work that's gone on, they should be congratulated for, because I think that sets us in a good position. But my concern is that there are real obstacles to us spending the money to produce the new houses that we need. And we've got to find out we've really got to understand the blockages to delivering, some of them which are in the developers going bankrupt and all those sorts of problems. But we've got to find ways of actually delivering against our targets and actually increasing our targets, because it seems to me that we can increase arithmetically, but demand is increasing geometrically at the moment. We've had a huge increase in the demand for social housing this year, and that's a real concern, that we're really out of kilter with the kind of demand that we've got. So that's my kind of concern about the capital account. Yeah, we need to get on and spend it, but there are barriers. We've really got to unpick those, because we've got to improve our delivery on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Sally, over to you.
Good evening, councillors. There's a lot to look at in this report and a lot to be concerned about for the future, not now, but the future. We have a lot of people going into very difficult financial situations with the rise in interest rates, their mortgages going up, their rents going up accordingly the same way. And a lot of people, I feel, will be coming to us for social housing in the future. And we've got to look at new and innovative ways to provide that. I was looking today on television in Bristol. They've got a scheme where they're using the half of council house properties, gardens, to build properties on in a new form of building using, it's almost like blocks of cardboard wood, and it's coated. I'm sure Mr. Lackaby and others will, or Jane will be looking at that, because they actually building them very cheaply. They're using local resources. They've built 40 so far, just in the backs of gardens for people to live in, families, single people. And these are the sort of innovative ideas. We don't need to just build all housing estates. You can look at all different aspects of housing that can actually provide homes. Years ago, we used to build prefabs, and I was looking back in the history of Northampton, and they used to build 5 prefabs a day when they came up in Duston at that time. Those of you old enough to remember them, people loved living in them. They were really super inside, and they were comfortable, and we had a real job dragging people out of them when we actually redeveloped that site. So those sort of things where we can build quickly and effectively. We've lost a lot of that. It's great we're building new houses for social housing, but we're still losing them through the right to buy. And the trouble is, if you go and drive around my ward at the moment and see how many have actually had the new cladding put on, you can see how many houses we've lost over the years with the right to buy. So, and I know we don't all agree with the right to buy, but the trouble is, if we don't use some of that land that we've got to build houses on, we could do a lot more. Can I also refer to, on page 61, the disabled facility grants? I just wondered, in Northampton and South Northants, 2003, 4 and 2000, it doesn't have any amounts in there. I know we're an aging population, and we want people to stay in their homes as long as possible, and disability facility grants allow that to happen. But I just wondered why that was taken off in the following years. I may be reading it wrong, but maybe you'll be able to enlighten me, Malcolm, on that, because I think it's so important that people can stay in their own homes and have their own life there are lots of different things in here. I noticed as well in one of the charges here, we're looking at potholes. On page 52, DFT football pothole fund 2020-21, that was a grant. The worry I've got with potholes is that we are not looking after pavements. And pavements, if we've got active travel plans and people need to walk safely on pavements, they're not being repaired quickly enough or well enough for people to walk on. So I really have concerns there. I know I'm over my time, Chair. Thank you for your indulgence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Thank you very much indeed. A few comments, I think. Adam,
Yeah.
you're going to come in and make some comments?
Yeah, firstly, in response to Councillor Purser, there's very little that he says that I can disagree with. What I would reassure him of is the fact that at the last cabinet meeting, we approved the new governance regime with MPH, and that's how we'll work collaboratively with them to understand those blockages and hopefully to overcome them in the very near future. Councillor Beardsworth, I'd reassure you that actually MPH have been very innovative. They're particularly around building new homes on garage sites and garage conversions into homes. I think they've done incredibly well. It would maybe take a braver portfolio holder than I to tell social housing tenants that we're going to build new homes on their gardens. But we have to innovate. We have to look at all options.
With agreements of the
and-
tenants, it was
yeah.
fine. It was an agreement because they couldn't cope with their gardens because they were getting older. So
And,
they,
and the housing team and I will obviously explore all options, but we need to be aware of the pitfalls and affecting people's quality of life as we move forward and try and find solutions.
okay, just look into it. That's all.
Thank you. Malcolm, you're going to make some comments on some of the points raised?
Yeah, very keen to do so. I think that probably I'll go in reverse order again. Sally, first is that the disabled facilities grant, we just had a quick look around and we matched the forecast into the grant we received. So the expectation is that we would get something there, but until we've actually got it, we don't put it in, you know, so that's I'd be concerned if it's not there next year. Okay, the other thing is Bristol. Now, I know a bit about Bristol, as you can tell from my accent. And I know that the council houses down there, they tended to have very large gardens. There's a particular area called Oldbury Court, which I know very well, because that's where my wife came from. And the gardens were massive and we just wouldn't do it today. So I'm very pleased. And the problem we've got a little bit there is that when you say the word prefab, it tends to be a bad connotation, isn't it? Because they're very cheap and well, post-war, very, very cheap. A prefabricated device now is quite a different matter, quite different. In fact, it'd be better than in many cases, it can be better than a brick built. And so I'll be down again in Bristol in not too distant future. So I'll see if I can't look that up. Be very interested. Yeah, but it's very large gardens in Bristol. Great place to live. Right, Bob, obstacles to spending the budget. Yeah, well, I mean, and inflation is, again, we're back to the inflation argument this year in particular. And builders going bust, well, that's quite normal, isn't it? What I've seen is the building business. And but the tendency tends to be, in my experience of this situation, is that the hardest part is finding the land, getting the planning, getting the actual building of it is, albeit inflation item to one side is relatively easy, but it's getting to that point is the tricky bit. And and I'm sure that you know, our colleagues on my left will do what they can on that. But I haven't got an answer. I just you know, agree with your observations, I guess. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malcolm. Anybody else want to make any comments at all on this one? No. Okay, thank you. In which case, as always, the recommendation, we've had the recommendations here are at section 2. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations? Is that agreed? Great, thank you very much. Takes us on to item 9. This is the Treasury Management update for Q3. Malcolm will introduce with a few words, and then we've 2 speakers registered, which are first of all Councillor Jonathan Harris and then Councillor Sally Beardsworth.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
And sorry, finally, Councillor McCord. Over to you, Malcolm.
There's 2 items I would refer to here, I think, possibly 3. First is that on page 79, it actually This is just a view of our advisors of where the bank rate's going. And the view of the people I deal with on the pension fund as well, a similar view. It looks as if they reckon it'll peak at 4.5. Now, whether that would be the case or not, I don't know, but it seems likely to me. So it's currently a 4 base rate, so it's likely to carry on. So we've got a bit to face this coming year. But then the prediction, it's only a prediction, is that it levels off back over the next couple of years. So I think next year is this coming year is not going to be easy any more than this one was. I point out on page 80 that the original borrowings that we'd approved was 592 million, and we're going to come in at 530. So we're going to keep our borrowings below that which we originally had okay for. And the final item, I say this every time because I really like this one, and that's table 2 on page 81, which shows the maturity of the borrowings. And it's immediately obvious that the bulk of them, and that's 400 million of them, is out in excess 30 to 40, 50 years, which bear in mind they're fixed rate. That means they effectively inflate away over time, and that's been the strategy. And over the coming next 30 years, no doubt, then it's relatively modest. And that is well below our external debt availability should we choose to use it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malcolm. Over to our speakers, Councillor Harris. Jonathan.
Just one point that I want to raise on the Treasury Management report. This item was probably effectively missed last year. You won't be surprised to hear me talk about the issue of environmental, social and corporate governance. And I do understand that we're in this situation where we're waiting for SIPFA guidelines on this, and obviously looking forward to hearing what they have to say. So I'm specifically referring to the appendices. It's page 336 of, I think, around 460 pages in total for the budget. So perhaps it's not a defense, but that might be one of the reasons why this wasn't particularly noticed or picked up on last year. But on that particular page, 336 of the appendices, it does specifically identify the ratings and the countries that are appropriate for investment in. You won't be surprised to hear me say that I would encourage the council to think carefully about those countries, regardless of what their ratings might be. And I know that there is a degree of subjectivity, perhaps, to the suitability of investments. But there are certainly some countries on there that I would suggest that we should favour more than others if we get the opportunity. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Where are we? Oh, Sally's next. Sally, over to you. At the same point, is it? Lovely. Okay, in which case, Councillor McCord, Ian, welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. I just want to, not much to say on, anything to say on the report. It's very clear. But recently there was a training exercise done on Treasury management. There is a video of the presentation that was circulated. I would recommend that to all members. Because the world of local government finance can be a bit opaque to people, but it was a reasonable attempt at actually shining some light on where we are and relating it, I think, more importantly, to the WNC position. So the presenter did go through our balance sheet, our borrowings, where they were coming from, et cetera, et cetera. It was quite informative. So I would recommend that to all members of the council to get hold of that. It was circulated, and maybe it'd be helpful to circulate it again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I think that's a great comment. I think we circulated it by email. I'm just wondering, Becky, whether we send a weekly newsletter out, whether we could repeat the link and a short description of it. I listened in on it and I thought it was particularly good, really helpful to understand. Okay. In which case, that's all of our speakers. Was there anything you wanted to come back on, Malcolm, on those comments?
Yeah, I would just say that thanks to Jonathan for pointing out page 336. I'm sure everybody had already seen that, though, Jonathan. And thank you very much, Ian, for reminding us of the course. That's very, very, very useful. I mean, I personally think the Treasury is one of the more important reports of all, because it's you know, we can't do anything unless we get our finances in good order and not over borrowed. And I refers to the fact that the borrowings are now lower than we predicted. That's how we want to keep it. It's if we carry on borrowing, it's not the way to go. We all know that on a personal basis, and it's absolutely no difference here in the council. Exact same principle. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments on this one, Treasury Management? Okay, that's great. The recommendation here is just that we note the report and the activity for the third quarter. So can I just ask you to confirm agreement to that recommendation? Agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, takes us on to item 10. This is the final budget and medium-term financial plan. So a number of aspects to this. We will indeed get Malcolm to do an introduction. Phil wants to make some comments. We have some speakers, but we do also have as an appendix as part of this a really important thing that has shaped this, which is the scrutiny report. So as I mentioned earlier, instead of doing the scrutiny report earlier, we thought we'd bring it in now. So we'll start, if we may, by handing over to the chair of the corporate scrutiny, chair of the budget scrutiny, Councillor McCord, just to introduce the report and the work of the budget scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll just talk about the report of the scrutiny committee and leave the introduction of the report to Cabinet. Firstly, can I express my thanks to everyone who helped take part in the scrutiny process that was undertaken. To yourself, Leader, we had a good couple of hours with pizza. To all the portfolio holders and members of the committee that attended, and to many officers, we were very well supported. And if you read through particularly the notes on the breakout groups, now you will see everybody listed. I don't intend to name everybody because I'll forget and then offend someone. But thank you all. We were extremely well provided for by both officers and members. Can I express my thanks to Ken Pritchard, Andrew Grant and Sally Beardsworth, who chaired the 3 breakout groups whilst they met and took comment. The report is has been circulated I think at the weekend. It is a report from the committee. It is not a personal view of mine, and I am reserve my right to disagree or not with some of the comments. But however, I will present the report as the committee started. So first off, I think as we stated in the meeting with yourself, Chairman, that we need to start this process of scrutiny of the budget a bit earlier, and probably by the middle of the summer. And we need to get better engagement between Cabinet and scrutiny in understanding what the issues are that are being grappled with. There's for instance, the range of figures that were mentioned, I think would be better with some narrative around the assumptions. And a good example of that would be the business rates, where, you know, depending on the assumption made as to whether or not it was going to be reset, you can at a stroke make your figures look 25, 30 million better or worse. So these sort of scary numbers of 60 million under can disappear at the stroke of a pen just by changing the assumption. And I just think it might be better to set out a range of figures to say, in the worst case, we're over here, in the best case, we're over there, we're more likely to be somewhere in the middle. But so the scrutiny process took sort of 3 distinct areas: fees and charges, care, both children's and adults, and the capital programme. So the appendix on the recommendations On fees and charges, the committee was generally supportive of the approach of the budget. Although they do think that we should have a better communications plan to outline some of the issues, just setting out, for instance, that some of the building control charges hadn't been looked at in a number of years, and therefore a reset on some of these was needed. And I think the members of the breakout group were satisfied with that explanations that came forward. The removal of the proposed car parking charges for the racecourse was welcomed, or at least the second look at that and see where you're going to come back to. It looks like some of the things that we were asking last week on car parking charges have been taken on board. I've had a very quick read through the additional appendix, so I think I'm right in saying that the committee strongly recommend there's a period of free parking at weekends. I think there's going to be a period of free parking at weekends from what I can see for a couple of hours. The Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee asked to reconsider the proposed daily charge of £12 for the country park. I think we can tick that as having had that, and recommends the Cabinet consider a car parking strategy that's aligned to the sustainability objectives. I think the concern is that these things need to be done in the round. Certainly some members, I'm not sure it was universally approved, agreed idea, certainly have issues with free parking over here and paid for parking in Northampton. But these were some of the comments made at committee. On the capital programme, again, I think the committee continues to be concerned about a net zero commitment from the council and little or no budget that can be found to achieve such grand ideas and grand ambition. But I think personally that's also an issue that the government has, having set this wonderful target, and nobody has the first clue how it's going to be met or what it's going to be cost. Nonetheless, we have written a blank check, and the committee continues to raise that. In general, I think Ken was satisfied with where we're at in the business cases that we are that we have that underpin the capital programme. But we also would like to see more in terms of that portfolio of projects on the shelf, that when government managed to find a few million quid down the back of their sofa, that we can put our hand up and get our share of that. And to date, the county in general has missed out on the fact that there hasn't been a set of projects on the shelf, costed and ready to go, that when that money becomes available, you can put your hand up with a credible scheme and get on with it. So then moving on to care, I think everybody acknowledges that it is the most challenging part of the council's operation and the most challenging part of its budget, because you've got demand-led services, you've got people with statutory rights and statutory needs, and you've no way of saying, we're terribly sorry, but we don't have any money for you this week. It just has to be done. So there are challenges that everyone who's familiar with local government finance is aware of. It's also as much a national problem as a local problem. And I think we should all be once again asking for central government to help sort the problem out once and for all, however central government of whatever colour wishes to do it, because I think it's been talked about for decades. It's time to reform social care. But I think it's also important that we note that there were £48 million of base budget changes, corrections, whichever term you wish to use, in this current budget. The vast majority of that, I think, was coming from, it was 22 million in adults and almost 9 in children's. So I'm hoping that, and we are hoping that this budget will therefore be more accurate, more deliverable. I see Malcolm is too, but it should be. It's a huge number that of corrections or changes to the assumptions. We still have that concern though, and it is difficult to get reassurance that particularly the children's budget will be brought in on budget. The only reassurance or the only thing is that we can supposedly take some comfort from is that Northants Children's Trust is not an outlier insofar as the rest of the country. The demand is rising all over the place across the country. It's no better or no worse, maybe a little better. We're not an outlier. So that's about the only crumb of comfort you can take. But we still believe that there is a huge risk to this budget in the care side of things, and that's something that you need to constantly be aware of. And I suppose I know the answer from Martin and Malcolm will be, well, that's why we have contingencies built into the budget. But nonetheless, I think the committee is saying we still think, like this year, there is a huge risk that you will be called on to dip into those contingencies when we get to this time next year, when you're reviewing your last quarter of your incoming year. So in general, those were the main themes. I don't want to detain the meeting any longer. There's a full and comprehensive report and all the detailed bits that led up to that. And I just once again thank everybody. Oh, and I forgot to mention Tracy and Richard and all the team in Democracy who actually managed to take our ramblings and put them into some sort of coherent English. So thank you to everyone, and I look forward to listening to the budget debate.
Jolly good. Yeah, thank you, Ian. And our thanks to all the members of Scrutiny and the supporting team and yourself. Some excellent recommendations here, some of which you've already noted have been taken on board. I'm sure others will comment a bit more, but we're really happy with all of these comments. And if we don't get them all covered, I might sweep up and make a comment on a few myself. But perhaps at that point, what we'll do first is go to Malcolm next. Briefly going to come to Phil to talk about parking charges, and then we have speakers, which I'll list in a second in terms of the order. But Malcolm, over to you.
Right, thank you, Chair. Well, I think I'm going to follow, as it's still hopefully in our memories, a couple of comments that Ian just made, really, that about the high risk. So I'll come back to that in a bit more detail in a moment, but yeah, you've got to bear in mind that we've got, as I said earlier on, we have a high likelihood of inflation carrying on through most of the year. It hopefully will subside as the year goes on, but nonetheless, it's still going to be high. We have a limited increase of 4.99% made up of the 2.99 plus 2%. Sure, you'll all remember how that was done over several years before. And as a consequence, we've majored on productivity and price increases, fees and all the fees in particular. A lot of the planning fees are statutory, as we know, and a lot of these fees and charges are statutory, but where we can increase them within reasonable bounds, we have done so, and that helps balance the budget. But productivity is another key part. Now, we've got the 4.99% increase, but a number of the difficulties that we've had have come in two areas really on inflation. One's pay awards. Now, we've got to bear in mind that for every 1% that is an increase in the pay of employees, that's £1 million. So it's a simple number, it's not exact, but it's a rule of thumb number, and that's clearly going to be quite a large increase, and it's detailed here in the report, as I'm sure you've all read. Also, the other large increase is where we've got inflationary increases in a contractual situation. Can't do anything about that because it's in the contract, and so that's where the main ones come from. And if you look through the increases that we put through on the fees and charges, what's very interesting for me, I found looking through them, was the incredible scope that we actually cover in this council. And it sounds a bit sad, but I actually counted them up, and there's 1,344 line items, and every one of those has has a story behind it. Now that's a lot of things we cover. There's not really very much more to add other than this budget is not without risks. There's a pay related 9 million, contract inflation near enough 18 million. And I think that what's interesting also is that Ian talked about the 2030 zero. And I was actually going to, I wasn't going to talk about it tonight, actually, Ian, but the formal meeting next week, I'm certainly was going to attack it head on. And we can't ignore that. What's interesting in the pension fund, which is a very, very substantial figure, that they've taken a rather different view. And they've taken the view of going for the 2050 Paris Accord. And that's a logarithmic scale and is currently bang on target. So we at the council will have to decide where we're going in specifically on a number of these items in due course. So I think that if you want a summary of the budget, the best page to go on is page 135. And I think that sums up the net budget quite well. So I don't think I really want to add any more at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. We'll just go over to Phil and then we take our speakers. Phil.
Thank you, Chairman. Following from our previous discussions, I want to sort of talk about some changes to our proposals with regard to car park charging. The room has been circulated with 2 documents, so everybody in the room should have these, detailing what it is we're proposing. And for those not in the room who are perhaps watching online, the documents have been published online, so they should be accessible for you. So on that basis, I'll just make a brief few comments, Chair. I mean, following the consultation, we've come up with a few proposals to try and overcome some of the concerns that amongst the public and the business community and others as well. We've had meetings with stakeholders to understand the impacts of car parking, and we've hopefully come up with a few small things that will perhaps ease that particular burden. I think it's worth remembering, Chair, that it's 2019 since car park charges were increased. Inflation since then is about 16%, and we're talking about a 10% increase here. So we're not meeting the full cost of inflation over the period since the car park charges were last increased. Although, of course, our overheads that we do incur on car parks have gone up: cleaning, lighting, business rates, etc., etc. All the overheads that we have, so they've gone up, but we're only increasing by 10% when inflation, as I say, has been at over 16% over that period. Consultation also identified concerns about the arrangements of the racecourse. The proposed charges have therefore been withdrawn to allow further consideration to be given to this area because there is still problems with that car park. Budget consultation included a significant number of comments on town centre car parking and country parks. As a result, the country park charges have also been reconsidered and amended, and this includes the introduction of free parking for blue badge holders in country parks. The draft budget signalled the start of the consultation on the budget process, and we received in excess of 3,000 comments, and a significant number related to parking charges in the town centre country parks. Therefore, as a result, the Cabinet have amended these proposals, and the parking proposals have now changed as follows since our original draft budget proposals. As I say, the introduction of car parking charges at the racecourse have been withdrawn for now. Park run season ticket is recommended to be introduced, which can be used at all country parks in West Northamptonshire and will allow free parking for park runners between 8:30 and 10 a.m. There is a slight amendment there, Chair. The document says between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. I'd like to revise that to 8:30 and 10:30 a.m., Chair. And the cost of that will be £5 a year. Also, the scale of charges, it does again refer to 8 till 10 a.m. That should be 8:30 till 10:30 a.m. So just to correct that. We're proposing the introduction of hourly charges for country parks rather than 2 hourly charges. So 1 hour will cost you £2, up to 2 hours, £3, etc., all the way up to a maximum of 6 hours for £7. And we're reducing as well the all-day rate charged at the country parks from £12 to £8. Similarly, reducing by £5 the season ticket for the dual season ticket. That's so you can either park at Daventry or Brixworth. That's coming down by £5. We will introduce free parking for 2 hours in all council-owned Northampton Town car parks on Saturdays and Sundays, with a flat rate of £2.20 for all-day parking on a Saturday and Sunday for stays over 2 hours. Parking periods payable per half an hour. We're looking to introduce, instead of hourly blocks, for periods up to a total of 5 hours for council-owned town centre car parks. Chairman, the cost of withdrawing the car parking charges at the racecourse was £60,000. Introducing a park run season ticket was £35,000. And the financial impact of the other changes highlighted that I've just highlighted, schedule for the car parking totals of 282,000. So we're looking to reduce our income by 282,000, and the general contingency will be reduced by this amount to reflect these changes in the proposals. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. I mean, we took the racecourse part was linked to a decision that was taken here last time we met, which straight away I think it was evident we should have consulted on a new charge coming in. We heard about the residence parking, which is a possibility. They're not always popular, but I think we've got to do more work on all that, haven't we? That's where we got to with that. But then revisions there to the general parking fees. Okay, quite a lot of information there. We've got quite a number of speakers. I think it looks about 10. First of all, our public speakers. The first one is Mark. Mark Mullen is registered first. I'll spin through the firing order so that you know. So we've got Mark on behalf of the Business Improvement District, Jake Blackburn, Mark Higgs, and then councillors. We've got Wendy Randall. See again? Oh, we got you registered, and you got a choice. Don't mind at all. We had you registered if you wish to. Do you want us to go through the others? We can come back to you if you like. Yeah, happy to do that. So in which case then we'll go with Mark Mullen, then we'll go on to the councillors, and then we'll give Mr. Blackburn and Mr. Higgs choices to whether they think if they want to add. In terms of councillors, the firing order is Councillor Randall, Purser, Kilbride, Holland-Delamere. Sorry, I've got that wrong. Randall, Purser, Harris, Bidsworth, Kilbride, Holland-Delamere, and Hill. So Mark, welcome. Over to you.
Evening, everybody. As I said, my name's Mark. I'm from Northampton's Business Improvement District. So we've got a representation of over 600 businesses based or within the catchment area of the town centre. The bid itself and remain in direct opposition to the proposals, really. And we're really grateful for the opportunity of having met with representatives from the council to discuss our specific challenges. I still feel that those 4 challenges that we raised are and still remain relevant at this point in time. So just to go through these 4 really quickly individually. So the first opposition is just around the consultation process itself. The fact that the car parking charges proposals were amongst 144 pages of other proposals. And really, how can we be in a position of retracting certain elements of that proposal which didn't sit as a proposal within their own rights? And surely it should have been a case of a retraction of the whole proposal and then a representation, rather than a really disjointed and fragmented approach that we've got now, with changes to some and not the other. The other point just to raise within the consultation, there was a lot of inconsistencies within those papers, with some reference being made to a 10p increase as opposed to a 10% increase. But obviously the impacts of a 10% increase is significantly higher than what the 10p was. The second charge, or the second objection really, is that within the current proposals, there are still 3 towns within the county that we're proposing not to put parking charges into. So namely Brackley, Daventry and Towcester. We've spoke earlier, and as a room, we all appreciate the fact that there is an overhead charge to car parking, whether that be the business rates for the car park or the upkeep and the maintenance. And I think at the very least, those are the towns that should then be making a financial contribution towards the provision of car parking directly within those proximities. The third one was around really a moral justification, really, as to how reduced cost of parking can be a reward and pay benefit to WNC officers. And if it is a case that £40 a month is deemed to be an acceptable price for parking in the town centre, why isn't that applicable for everybody else? Fully understand as an organisation, it's vital that you get the skills and the qualification within your workforce. However, that's a situation that's replicated by a lot of the other businesses in the town, that they are struggling to get that resource into their businesses, with the cost of car parking being a major detraction. The fourth challenge was then just based around the Road Traffic Regulation Order of 1984, and whether it is deemed to be lawful within that act. So if we could just have some clarification around that one, that would be really good. Just bringing us back to just one specific thing around the 3 towns, and I know that this is a manifesto commitment. I would challenge whether the economic success of the county town should be jeopardised in terms of complying with a manifesto commitment. But what I did just want to make reference to is to a graph which I have provided to Paul, who will circulate amongst the papers for the meeting. But this just refers back to when the car parking increases were last implemented in 2018. And if you were to make a comparison between 2018's figures and 2017, they tracked really, really closely throughout the year, until those increases were implemented towards the end of 2018. At the point that was put in place, we then saw a reduction of around 50,000 visitors a week at that point, coming into the town centre. The graph obviously takes into account the last 6 years, and yes, there have been significant changes into Northampton during that period of time. But in terms of that level of drop, and I would personally predict the level of drop is going to be greater due to the unprecedented levels of disruption that we're going to see in the town on the back of the works that are about to start. But if we were to apply that sort of deduction to where we've started 2023 at, potentially we're going to see average visitor numbers fall to less than 200,000 people a week. Which, looking at the graph from 2020, is that we're self-inflicting a period of footfall that we experienced during COVID. And it's, speaking on behalf of the businesses that I represent, the feeling is that this is categorically the wrong decision to make at this point in time, given a level of disruption and impact that the works are going to have. And just a real question that we've already seen 3 major retailers within the last 2 weeks vacate the Grosvenor Centre. So we've lost Select Clothing, we've lost Mankind. New Look are due to close their doors for the final time in 3 days. And there just is a big concern as to what is the size of businesses' reserve accounts at this point in time? And are they going to survive a 2-year period of disruption whilst these, and at the same time, the car parking increases?
Thank you, Mark. And just, although we've got a list of speakers to get through, just to thank you. It was good to be able to use the bit as a representative voice of the businesses and to come along and meet with you and colleagues a little while ago. Thank you for quickly putting together the survey that you did of town centre businesses. Tremendously helpful to us. Let's move on to our other speakers, first of which I've got is Councillor Randall. Wendy?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to focus mine around the parking charges mainly. On page 111, it talks about harmonisation and it gives the different percentages of the council tax rises. So if you look at the Daventry area, we've got the biggest increase of 6.12%, and we probably are the cheaper ones to operate, as you know, some people will know that we have our bins collected every 3 weeks. So people feel that it's very unfair that we get a reduced service compared with the rest of you, and yet we get the highest increases. Then when it comes to the country park charges, that has been just, people have just so angry over that. I mean, how can you go from a flat rate of £2.20 a day and then introduce all of these charges? You've got 300% and 400% increases on these charges. I was talking to a lady the other day and she lives in a lane on the edge of the country park. And she said there's usually about 2 cars parked along there. Well, all this has come about and people think that these charges have already happened. And she said there was 30 cars parked up her street. I've been down at the country park and I've been on the radio with Martin Heath, and we actually stopped and we spoke to people that were using the park. Really surprised me actually, because the first person we spoke to was a gentleman from Leamington. And he said he comes over, he uses the parks, goes around, and he comes here about every couple of months. He won't come again. He said there's plenty of other parks. I won't pay those sort of charges. The next person we spoke to was from Dustin. They said they won't bother using the park either. They'll go elsewhere where they don't have to pay for parking. So other people I've spoken to, across the way, we've got a car park where we've got a doctor's surgery and a dentist. People have just said, we'll just park over there because it doesn't cost us. Then my concern is that you've got sick people coming to the doctors that can't even get into the car park. So while people are prepared to pay £2.20 charge, where the 20 is a bit odd because even the signage doesn't even all say 2.20, because some of the signage still in there says £2. But why people are prepared to pay £2, they definitely do not see why it's fair to have those increases when you've got country parks in other areas that pay absolutely nothing. If we're going to harmonise the whole of West Northamptonshire, we need to harmonise it across the board. How is it fair that South Northants don't pay for their country parks, and yet the 2 country parks in the ex-Daventry area do? So does that mean that the money collected from there will go towards paying for provision on all the parks? Because my understanding, the car park charges are to upgrade other parks. So I've always been against parking charges in a country park because I think it should be a free place where people can exercise and for children to play. But it is what it is. I still strongly recommend that, and that flat charge stays as it is. Over in Brixworth, they're looking to introduce 3 sessions of open air swimming. Now, they were going to encourage their users to have the yearly subscription, but that's gone up significantly now. So their fear is that people won't be parking in our car park. They'll go and park elsewhere or fill up the country lanes. So, you know, I did expect this to be drawn off the table and then go out and actually look at it, you know, across the whole board. I'm pleased that the racecourse has been taken off. I parked in the racecourse the other day and there wasn't much movement in and out of that car park, but then you've got a lot of businesses nearby as well. So if they're not parking in the car park, then they're clogging up the streets. So, you know, I know we want everybody out the car parks, you know, out of cars, and we want people to walk, but then we need to have the means to do that. A lot of children in Daventry, they can't get into their neighbouring schools. They go across to the other side of the town. On their way home, the parents call in the country park for the children to play, which is why I would have liked to see, and I've said, the first 2 hours are free, because, you know, I don't want to see children being deprived of being out in the open air. I don't want them just stuck in at home. I was pleased that the town centre for the weekend charges, you know, they've been dropped. I know a lot of people that come into Northampton when the parking was free, and they won't bother when they've got to pay. You know, and it is a huge concern. And like the gentleman just said, you know, the businesses are leaving town. If they leave town, that means your business rates has gone as well. You know, surely we should be doing things to people to encourage people to come into town and spend their money into town. We don't want people turning away and going to Milton Keynes, where they say that, you know, we've got all indoor shopping, parking's cheaper, and we've got a lot more shops to offer. You know, we want people to stay here. We need to encourage them to stay here. And by introducing these parking charges is definitely not the way to go. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Etty. I think a lot of the points that you've made there might mean, to be fair to everybody else, we won't be giving them as much time, but it may mean that some of your colleagues' points have been made. Bob, did you have anything you particularly wanted to add to that?
Yes, Chair, I think there are issues other than parking charges. One of them, or two of the areas that we're under pressure for, are because government has not sorted out adult services and children's services. And I think this is a real problem for local government, where government is not, that has very significant impacts on our budget, does not sort out the policy framework. And I think that's a real indictment of this current government, that they've had a lot of years to sort these things out and they haven't done them. So that's one thing. The second thing is about how we develop policy as a council. And I think that's what this housing, this parking issue is about. And we are still a new council. And I think we've still not quite worked out how we do policy, consultation and budgets. And I think the lesson is that this process needs to start earlier, and we need to work through the conflicting issues that are there. And there are conflicting issues, because we have got a green agenda. We do need to achieve modal shift, but we also need to support our businesses in this area. And there is an imbalance between the out of town shopping and the town centre shopping that we want to support. Those issues have got to be sorted out. There's got to be proper consultation with the public, and people have got to buy in to the policy solutions that the council comes to. And that's a real challenge for the cabinet to think about how it does that. So that's my that's really my contribution to this bit of the debate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Bob. I think you're right on the parking strategy for sure. Bill might say more about that. Councillor Harris, Jonathan, over to you, and we'll give you a little bit more time. You've something to read on behalf of parish council chairman, I think, who couldn't be with us. Is that great? Yeah, thank you. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two items, actually. I'll do them in reverse order. I'll stick with the car parking issue because that seems relevant to do that at this particular moment. Clearly, there are lots of different perspectives on this, and I think I, like probably most of my colleagues, know that this is a difficult and challenging area. So in regards to Brixworth, I'm actually pleased to see some of these changes coming forward, because it is something that we've been asking for some time, particularly the opportunity to stay and pay for shorter periods of time, which I think is very important. Also, things like the introduction of ANPR in the future and the Blue Badge concession, I think they're all really positive things. However, my big issue is it's still inequitable. It still costs you double to park for an hour on these revised charges in the country park than it does in town. So Councillor McCord referred to a parking strategy, and it is a fact that we have other market towns where we don't charge anything. I'm not sitting here advocating that we should by any means. However, we're definitely out of kilter. And it feels to me that the point has been made about harmonisation. If we are to harmonise, then surely this is an issue that we have to look at on a collective basis. It just feels entirely inequitable at the moment, but please note that there's a positive movement from my point of view on some of those issues. I'm also very pleased to see the park run concession. That's something else that's been asked for some period of time. That's a positive move. Councillor Randall mentioned that the operator of Swim Cube at the park, who is a tenant of West Northants Council, has got permission from Anglian Water to start doing open water swimming in the future. In the past, he's had point blank no to any concessions. I really do think we should encourage the exploration of concessions also. If we're doing it for park run, I really do think we should be looking at that as an opportunity also, because it's likely to generate a huge amount of traffic into the park. They're also going to be there for shortish periods of time. But nonetheless, I do think that should be incorporated or thought about if that comes forward. So the bottom line is, from my point of view, I just think this is an area that is feeling like it's a bit piecemeal. And I genuinely say that we need to be looking at that much more holistically and looking across the whole of the area. So that's enough for me on the parking side of things. If I may now just move on to the other item, which is around buses. So this is linked to the proposal in the budget. I have been given a statement, and I thank you, Jonathan, for allowing me the opportunity to include this in tonight's meeting. This is from Paul Reedman, who is the chairman of Naseby Parish Council. So I'm going to read the statement on his behalf. In years gone by, buses served Naseby and surrounding villages connecting to Market Harborough and or Northampton. This is evidenced by the bus stops and shelters visible today, but the service had been completely withdrawn for some years prior to 2018-19. From 2018-19 onwards, Naseby Parish Council has been an integral part of the motivating force and provision of parish funding for the 5960 bus service, which runs along the A5199 corridor, linking Northampton and Market Harborough. The project has demonstrated how parishes working together can achieve something tangible. A number of Naseby bus users are elderly or frail and for a variety of reasons can no longer drive. The 5960 bus provides them with a vital opportunity to get out and maintain their independence without feeling they are a burden on others. For Naseby residents, the service provides the potential for shopping, banking, optician visits, socialising, etc. in Market Harborough on Tuesdays and Fridays, and in Northampton on Monday, Wednesday and Thursday. If the service were to be removed, the quality of life and level of independence for some residents would be reduced. Naseby Parish Council considers the contribution of the service as extremely important, and West Northamptonshire Council are requested to allocate the resources to ensure its continuation into 2023 and 24 and future years. Please maintain the 5960 bus service. So that's the statement from the chair of Naseby Parish Council. A couple of comments from me just relating to that. It's extremely disappointing to see that we are proposing to reduce bus subsidies to 100,000. And this puts potentially a number of bus services at risk, including one of the two major routes in my ward, the 5960s, the A5199, and the other route is entirely different down the 508. At council next week, I will be presenting a petition. We're nearing nearly 400 signatories of people on that route with a plea for a reconsideration of that, the funding for that particular route. We know that parking has been very contentious, and my perspective is that it's clearly an issue that's got people very energized around, quite rightly, but you've moved very quickly to make a decision around a particular parking fee on one area. So I really would encourage this cabinet to ensure that we look at all aspects of West Northants, and of course, not just the town. Let's not turn our budget process into a version of the Levelling Up Fund, which seems to be about who shouts loudest, or the beauty parade of best bids. But please make sure rural communities are heard too. It's important. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Beardsworth, Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, I've been on the council a long time, and I can remember when we did on-street parking with a gentleman called Terry Wire, if you remember him. He brought an on-street parking in Northampton because people were parking there all day and people couldn't get to the shops, and it wasn't suggested it would turn into a cash cow. It was suggested that it would stop people parking there all day, allowing people to access the shops. But now it seems it's gone the other way. Rather than helping businesses, it's going to detract from them. Consultation is so important, and yet we seem to fall down on it, and I don't understand why. Because we have the bid, we can go out and talk to people. I talked to a lady in Jarlsy Street just this week, and she said, it's really difficult, she said, because we haven't got a loading bay. So my stuff comes on pallets and they have to carry it for a long way. The traffic wardens are red hot. If anybody stops to buy a couple of items from my shop, they're on them straight away. They have to get a parking ticket, and they don't want to do that. That she's got a sister shop in Rushden Lakes. And she said a lot of people won't come to Northampton, they'll go to Rushden Lakes to buy these cakes that she sells and other services because they can park for free. Now, I was against Rushden Lakes because I knew what would happen. We have enough outside places, people like Riverside and Sixfields, where people don't pay to park. And yet we penalise the town centre businesses by charging people to park there. And I think this is wrong. Plus, as the gentlemen have said today, that Towcester, Brackley and Daventry don't pay anything. If we're going to harmonise and make it fair across the board, surely if we could reduce the car parking here and just put small charges in those. I know charging is going to be unpopular, whatever you do, but at least people can see that people are being treated fairly and rationally, rather than this business of you have to pay because you're in Northampton, but you can go to Daventry, you can go to Towcester, and you can go anywhere else and not pay. So to me, it's something that you need to do. We've got the bid, we've got an opening there. We can go and talk to people like I've done over this issue. And it's been such a shame because, you know, it's really upset people that, you know, you've got the people coming tonight to speak and they're really upset that they haven't done the due process of going to speak to them first before you did it. The other things I wanted to mention on it's not just on that, it's the fear that we've got. We're putting amendments through on the budget, and I hope you will look at them seriously, the same as the Labour are putting through amendments, because I think there's some good ideas that will come forward from ours. I know we're probably not going to get them accepted, but there are some ideas that you might want to take up. So don't be completely negative to what we put forward, because they are to do with things that are really important to people's lives. I think that's all I wanted to say about the other things. Most people have covered other points, so I won't go on alarmingly about those.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sally. And look, if you've got alternatives, do let us know. We've got them nice and early to consider them rather than the, you know, on the hoof. Thank you. Okay, three more speakers. Next, we've got Councillor Kilbride. Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm here to speak up for Northampton residents and businesses in Northampton regarding parking charges and refuse bins. A lot's been said about parking charges. I welcome the 2 hours free at the weekend now, Saturday and Sunday. That's a good incentive, and the flat rate of £2.20 for the rest of the day. What about in the week? What about the Monday to Friday? Businesses operate there as well. You know, what help are we going to give to businesses? Businesses are struggling as it is. It's just come out of COVID, footfall's down. As Mark said from the bid, we've got the Market Square, regeneration. No, we are going to struggle. Phil has said about, you know, charges have gone up since 2019. I accept that. But in other parts of West Northamptonshire, they're not paying those charges and you're still paying those bills. So the car parks in Tolster and Daventry, you know, they're hard to be maintained and cleaned. So who's paying for that? I'm led to believe that's the Northampton people are paying for that in their parking charges. And that's not fair. We need to be fair. And I appreciate that it was a manifesto pledge, but things from years ago, you said nothing's off the table. So we need to look at that again. And I think we should do perhaps a review. Have the officers done a report including all charges for all the car parks in West Northamptonshire? Has that been done? And can that be considered? You know, how are we going to attract investment in Northamptonshire? In Northampton, if the car parking charges are high and the footfall is low, how are we going to do it? You know, you've got some great stuff going to go ahead. You've got the Vulcan Works, you've got the Market Square, but how are you going to get those people back in town in 2 years' time? I'm real concerned. That's all I'll say on the parking charges for now. The bins going 3 weekly. I understand that you need to try and save money, but Northampton is a different demographic to the likes of Daventry. There's a lot more people in Northampton, got 220,000. There's a lot more rubbish generated. So it needs to be taken away. Residents deserve a top-class service. When we was at the NBC, we agonised going from 1 week to 2 weeks, and here we are now going from 2 to potentially 3. So I feel that you need to relook at that again if you can. And I appreciate that you need to try and save money wherever you can, because the Children's Trust is taking all your money. I know it is. We need government intervention there. It's the only way to balance those books. Because 6 months, 9 months down the line, I fear that you'll be in another predicament of, you know, more overspending the Children's Trust. So for me, you know, that's all I've got to say tonight. I'd say thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Holland-Elmer, Keith? You think everything's been covered? Yep, fine. Councillor Hill, James.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank and congratulate Cabinet members and officers on producing a balanced budget, something that, given the current climate, I know couldn't have been easy. And I know that obviously lots of other local authorities are struggling to do this, so I do appreciate that you've done well to get here. Obviously, I appreciate that some very difficult decisions have been taken, and I accept that a lot of time and energy has gone into this. While like myself, I'm pleased tonight to hear about a lot of the changes that have been made, especially regarding parking. However, I didn't really want to discuss a specific issue tonight, but rather the ongoing sustainability of future West Northants budgets. As many of you know, when West Northants and North Northants came into existence, at the behest of the government, the main reason touted for this reorganisation was financial gain and the ability to streamline and provide more efficient services for our residents. This obviously included the introduction of the newly formed Children's Trust, which will be responsible for the county's children's services. It seems an age ago now, but at the time there was much resistance to these proposals from both the former borough and district council alike. Indeed, as a former borough council, I shared many of these concerns. For me, the main issue with the government proposal was that the natural buffer provided by having 2 distinct separate budgets, both both borough and county, would be lost. This would effectively mean that, as with the former county council, every aspect of the budget would be up for grabs to fund the ever-increasing demand on our statutory services. Add to this a brand new independent children's trust, which has far less accountability than an in-house manned council-led children's service. I fear we may have the perfect economic storm moving forward. Unfortunately, some aspects of this budget confirms that some of these fears are now coming true. For example, members will be aware that Children's Trust monetary requirements were far more than expected this year, along with a continued increase in adult social costs. So where do we go from here? Clearly, there is no magic wand, but as a council, I think we need to accept this problem is not going to go away. And in fact, I predict it will only get worse year on year as demand increases. How long can this cabinet be expected to make impossible decisions about increasing discretionary service fees such as car parking or reducing the service that we offer residents, albeit bin collections or other fees that we offer? And simply put, I don't think it's fair or sustainable to continue to use these to fund gaps in the future. I therefore urge our our cabinet and senior officers to continue to put pressure on Westminster and ask for our ongoing assistance from our 4 West Northampton MPs to ensure that our voice is heard in the battle for fairer funding. Along with North Northampton, it's important to remember that our council is unique in that the current system of local government only exists because of direct government, direct intervention and implementation. It does not seem unreasonable to me to ask the government to help properly fund the system that they created. In fact, Jonathan and myself have had many conversations about how Northamptonshire residents do a lot less better in terms of individual funding compared to other councils in the country. Even if our pleas do fall on deaf ears, at least in a year's time, the cabinet will be able to say they did everything in their power to get more funding and avoid some of these difficult decisions going ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James. There's quite a lot to sweep up there. I think yes, that's everybody on this. So just go back to Mr. Blackburn mistakes. Did you want to chip in anything, gentlemen? No. Yeah, over to you, Mark. It's also for the people if we got people listening online. Okay, let's
I know, but he done it last week. He knows what he's doing last time. He knows what he's doing. So I wasn't going to speak, Phil. Wasn't going to speak, Phil. Quite clearly, it's gone. The parking is just, everyone hates it, Phil. Yeah, everyone hates it. I think that's obvious. Everyone hates it. Yet you put recommendations in there that literally. So I'm going to keep it really because I can't be bothered with it. Is your long-term strategy to drive people away from town and stop them using country parks? Could you please answer that question to me? If it's not your strategy, tell me how the strategy is to get more people into town and to get more people in green spaces. Because your prices are insane. You can go to London for cheaper. So I don't know where, yes, you can park in London for cheaper. You probably don't know that, but you can. Yes, you can. I can park at a tube station cheaper. Are you having a laugh? Outside of London, outskirts of London, yeah, I can park for cheaper. So, but are we comparable to London? No. So why are our car parking charges more? Do you know what, Phil? You're better placed to answer that than I am. What are we comparable? Not what we were 20 years ago. It's a disgrace what you've turned this town into. You're going to go down those lines, Phil. And it's the roads. They're a danger. I'm on my bike every day, nearly going down bloody craters into the centre of the earth. Are you in control of roads as well? Because I don't think you're fit for purpose, Phil. Honest to God, you're a danger. You started it, Phil.
I'm sensing from the room, Mark, honestly, if you got some other points you want to make, please do. But
he started it last time as well.
Well, let's just pull it back from the
being a
postal
bit
comments
antagonistic.
both. And if you've
I'll
any
pay you
further
wages, mate.
points to make, please do, Mark. Otherwise,
You're supposed to answer to me. You've been blanking us on emails, haven't you? You said you're going to meet us. Now you're not. Yeah. So you did lie to us then. Why is that?
Excuse me.
I'm a member of the
Chair.
public.
I think this is totally inappropriate. I think the personal attacks
okay,
on the floor against.
I'm a bit more of the living.
All right, go back to my initial question.
Reading that.
Are you looking to drive people away from town and country parks? Is that part of your long-term strategy? And I just want an answer on that. And sorry, one other. Why is it I can't get free parking anywhere? I can go out there and get free electric as well. I'm getting rid of an electric car because there's no infrastructure in Northampton town, but yet the one directly outside of the council office is all free. Bonkers that.
Okay, Phil might want to ask that.
Yeah,
just to confirm that's not the strategy, Mark. Okay.
Well, can you explain the strategy?
Did you also, we had you on the list, Mr. Blackburn, Jake, did you want to add anything or?
No, the guest speakers already. Very well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Right, so there's quite a lot of points to sweep up there. Did you want to make a start, Malcolm?
Yes, it's fine. Thank you, Chair. well, it's sometimes these meetings are quite boring, but there we are. Not tonight. Well, the overwhelming issue that came out of there was parking. I think everybody mentioned it as far as I can judge. And I'm not going to comment on it, on the parking. Phil's already done that, and I'm sure that there'll be continuing discussions on it. What I would say, not just parking, but any of these items where there's been increases, is nobody does this lightly. Nobody wants to do it. Of course they don't. But you've got a situation where if you looked at it, there's something like about £22 million additional going into adult care next year. Children are overspent by 7 million. That's just our bit. Bear in mind the North gets an equal hit by 7 million year to date, and so an extra, a large amount, I think it's 7 million has been put into children's for next year to cover that, plus in inflation. And these are where the pressures are. So as I think James rightly said, I mean that's unlikely to get better. It's more likely to get worse, and we all know that. That's it. So therefore, we are faced with difficult decisions, and we do the best that we can to get it right. Now we don't always get it right, I can hasten to add. And so that's the first point I made. The second point is, I think Wendy touched on it, and I think Sally touched on it. Any good ideas are very gratefully received. You know, we're not precious on that at all. I think we all want to see this council succeed, and any good ideas that we're very keen to get hold of. What I would say, going back on normally I wouldn't make this sort of confession, but I will do, in that what we have kept back is there's a contingency in next year's budget for just that situation that you suggest, James, of 11.1 million. And we had a bit of a debate last year whether we should or shouldn't have contingencies of that magnitude, and goodness me, aren't we glad we did. So we expecting a similar situation maybe next year. Anyway, we're ready for it should it happen. So that's really, I think all the other ones, I think that good point from Bob on the policy of that's good. I thought that was a very sound observation, and I think we should do that. Harmonisation, Wendy, I would touch on that one, in that we've no choice in this. The choice we had on vesting day, or the budget we put together, we were instructed government-wise, no question about that, we had to harmonise all the areas. And the only debate at the time was whether we did it over 1 year or 3 years. In hindsight, I wish we'd done it in 1 year. Then it would have been all behind us two years ago, but it doesn't. So the last 3 years, that's been the case. And you and I were both in the Daventry Council, and it was very well run financially, and that's why we're coming from behind, as it were. Equally, if somebody was talking on behalf of the borough, they would say, well, our council tax has been less than 4.99 every year for the 3 years. And so it's been a levelling up and levelling down. That's the reason, and nothing to do about that this year. But it's the last year of it. So, Chair, I think those the points of significance, I think, I've got there, and I'll leave it at there if that's okay.
Okay, there's quite a few other points. Phil, did you have anything you want to come in on there? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and cover some of the points. I mean, we did meet with the bid and representatives of the bid, and I hear what Mark says, and thank you for reiterating the case. I'm pleased you're happy about the 2 hours, but would want a lot more. I think we've gone as far as we can, Chair, in the current financial situation. But with regard to staff benefits, we're happy to work with businesses. We will sell spaces for season ticket holders, and we will look and work to identify where the surplus spaces are and how we can best utilise those. And of course, businesses are free to buy them from us at whatever the going rate is, and then selling them on to their employers at a cheaper rate, thereby giving them the benefit an employment benefit, and we would be happy to work with you, with people on that. I think Councillor Randall and Councillor Kilbride talked about the 3 weekly bin collection. Nothing is going to happen on that, Chairman, until it is decided through the waste strategy, which is currently being worked on with through a member working group, cross-party working group. And as I say, nothing will come until that policy and strategy has been agreed through with the engagement of that group. So please be assured of that. I hear what Councillor Randall says about people parking elsewhere. Exactly the situation with the racecourse. It's people park up there because it's free and they can go somewhere else. But it is something we need to keep an eye on. We need to look at areas where we might shift parking problems to, and we will take that on board. But I would have thought that the introduction of a 1 hourly charge at our country parks, which is something that hasn't been there before, will certainly help in that people at lunchtime can go into the country parks for an hour, have their sandwich, have a quick walk, whatever. So I think that's a benefit there. But yes, let's be mindful of where people park. And Councillor Randall talked about why are country parks in South Northampton free? Well, there ain't none. There's no country parks in South Northamptonshire. So, you know, simple as. As I say, the racecourse will continue to be looked at. But let's remember that that's there for the users of the park primarily. Bob talked about policy and strategy. Yes, I do agree we need to review and revise policy and strategy across West Northamptonshire. And now that the staff are coming on board, we've had somebody start very recently in the last 2 weeks. We will start visiting all these policies and strategies. There's some being worked on at the moment. Jonathan referred to the open swimming and concession and things like that. We're happy to talk to anybody. Please come and talk to us and see what we can do. Similarly, I understand the situation with regard to the buses, but we are, as you know, having a consultant look at how we best support bus routes and how we operate and utilise the money we've got available to best advantage of everybody. And the working group, the bus working group that Jonathan's a part of, will be meeting once that consultant's report has been received, and we will discuss the best way forward in light of that with our officers. Sally talked about on-street parking. Yes, that was brought in, definitely. You know, Sally knows full well that we had people parking all day in St Giles Street outside Northampton Guildhall back in the day, and walking down to the station and catching a train to London and not coming back till the night time. And that was a real problem. I think we had one traffic warden around Northampton or something, and if they were off, there was nothing. It was absolute chaos. And that's why that was brought in. But I think it's fair to remember, Sally, that on-street parking charges haven't increased for a lot longer than the current the car park charges. Again, you know, we do have to pay for the machines, etc., etc. So I think it's only a 10p increase. And if memory serves me right, it was suggested that businesses wanted to increase it even more, or some businesses did. It came up at our meeting with the bid, I think, Chairman, where some people said on-street parking should be at a premium, so that you know, people who want to go to shops and that pay that premium price. And that was certainly something that Stuart reminded me of, that was said at that meeting. And I think, yeah, I hear what you say. Rushden Lakes is free, Milton Keynes is cheaper. But you've got to compare like with like, and you're not comparing like with like with Northampton Town Centre and Rushden Lakes. And we've got to really focus. We've got to really, Mr. Chairman, can you? Is he finished? Can I say, you've got to compare like with like. Northampton is refocused itself. It's not what it was. it's becoming something different. And, you know, we're investing in the town to try and transform it, the work we've done on the cultural quarter and things like that. So, yeah, we've got to sort of take that into account in looking at our strategy, which we will be doing going forward. So there's a lot to do there. I totally accept that. Andy referred to parking at the 2 free hours and welcome that, but I hear what he says about the situation Monday to Friday, and we have considered that, but we are where we are. Again, you know, looking at the whole situation of parking across West Northamptonshire, that will be addressed as the strategy comes out later this year, hopefully. And James, I totally agree. We need to put pressure on Westminster and our MPs. You know, we are one of the lowest funded councils in the country, and that isn't right. So, you know, let's certainly support that. Don't think I'll really add any more, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Matt, you wanted to comment on some of the points raised.
Okay, we on. Thank you. I was just going to add a couple of points to the issue of social care, which was brought up 2 or 3 times by different speakers there, and off the back of the point Phil just made around funding, whether it's children's or adults. Still, adult social care needs fundamental reform in how it's funded, and the Care Act gets changed from time to time. Proposals are made and then they're withdrawn again. And I think we need to use the channels and opportunities we have with our MPs and support campaigns through the likes of the LGA on how we fund you know, children's and adult social care. They're huge issues. It's a national issue, as has been mentioned earlier when we talked about children's and the trust, you know, there. And you know, one of the points made during scrutiny was, are we an outlier in the figures and proportions that we're dealing with? And we're not. So we need to support national campaigns, use the opportunities, like we say, to highlight these concerns and the system concerns around how we discharge people from hospital. The issues around money and the funding and how that's channeled through needs to be reiterated at the earliest opportunity. And going back to county council days, we are one of the lowest funded authorities. The adult social care, we're the lowest funded operation, you know, per portion of population in the country. So, you know, we're extremely efficient. We use every opportunity, and I've seen that through Stuart and his team, you know, challenging the directorate to draw out further efficiencies, make the service better at the lowest cost possible. So without moaning about, you know, possibly how it was done in the past, we just got to use the opportunities we can to say, look, these are the facts. These are what we're trying to deal with. We've got some brilliant people working really, really hard in some, you know, really challenging circumstances. Carers, how we deliver care. Again, that's another national issue. You know, we need to really up the game on how we support carers as a profession and wrap all the services around them to enable them to do their job properly. So, you know, there's a lot of work going on in this organisation. I really want to support, acknowledge the extra money going into adult social care this year, and that's testament to the corporate management of the whole sort of entity here within the council to recognise those challenges and support the directorate in children's and adults. I'm sure Councillor Baker can speak for herself, but just to recognise those big, huge challenges that we're working really hard to deal with. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Matt. And indeed, Fiona, you were going to come in, I think, make some comments then.
I was just going to say, Chairman, that we constantly are lobbying government to provide extra funding for various things. As a lead member, I'm a member of the group called the F40, which is all of the lead members in the East Midlands. We meet on a monthly basis, and the last month we sent a joint proposal to government because we find that works better. It did work with the Youth Justice money for children. We got an increase in the funding by doing that. Last month's plea was for children with special educational needs, because that's an underfunded budget as well. So we are constantly asking for the right amount of funding, and that's what we will continue to do. But as Matt said, it is the most challenging area to work in, and every day is a challenge, and constantly we're getting calls and emails about children who need our help, and that's what we're there for. Unfortunately, that does cost money.
Okay, sorry, you're going to come back in, Phil, beg your pardon.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Having dealt with the difficulties of car parking, I'd like to move on and talk about highways more generally. Because following consideration of the budget consultation exercise, I'm suggesting that we amend the final budget proposals recommended to council to include the creation of a highways fund of £1 million to be funded through repurposing one-off reserves. Following consultation, it is clear that the condition of the highway is of particular concern to residents and stakeholders. Cabinet have taken this into account in framing their final budget recommendations to council. In looking at the current evidence, number of complaints and condition of the roads, it is clear the winter weather has experienced, along with the several periods of freezing temperatures followed by warmer temperatures, has had a particularly damaging impact in regard to the number and size of potholes appearing. It is therefore proposed that a further £1 million be allocated to the highways maintenance budget to be used to prioritise potholes, including investigation and possible investment of new machinery that would improve the productivity and efficiency of the maintenance process. The draft budget signalled the start of the consultation on the budget proposals contained within it. The consultation received in excess of 3,000 comments, and a significant number of these related to potholes on the roads and general highways maintenance. As a result, we are proposing a further £1 million funding is set aside as a highways fund to invest further in reducing the number of potholes across the area, along with other highway maintenance improvements. There is already capital and revenue funding available for repairing potholes and general repairs and maintenance of highways. The introduction of a £1 million highways fund is in addition to the funds already included in the draft budget proposals. It is recommended that the £1 million of the transformation reserve is repurposed to fund this additional proposal. I think, Chair, that's a welcome proposal. I think we all know that the state of the roads in West Northamptonshire is not getting any better despite our efforts. And I think if we can look at more efficient and effective machinery, not just to improve the number of potholes that we repair, but the quality of the repair that we do, because far too many get repaired and then within 6 months to a year, you're back out trying to clear them again. So it's a question of speeding it up, being more efficient and filling more potholes, but it's also a question of getting the quality right as well. So I think that with that £1 million, Joe, I'm hoping that we will see a tangible improvement in the situation of potholes across West Northamptonshire.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Any other comments from anybody at all? Okay, there's a lot of ground covered here, and once again, to come out the scrutiny, I haven't answered all the points, but indeed, thank you. Points all taken and taken on board. Parking strategy, both Northampton, it's something we talked about in Northampton Borough for some time and hadn't done, so it's on our list, and indeed that must go West Northants wide as well. Transport strategy, parking strategy, and so on. So agree with those points. There's a lot of tough choices here. There's absolutely no doubt. There's a lot of tough choices, and it is most common that our speakers raise concerns about things that they didn't like, with not too many alternatives, and that's why I'm honestly looking forward, Sally, Wendy, if there are budget alternatives, get them to us in good time, rather than the on the night at full council, standing there looking at something that sounds good, but have we costed it and so on. So if there are good alternatives, so far we're not hearing any, but we look forward to give them proper consideration. Probably don't have too much more to say myself on this, other than just to clarify that there is a long list of recommendations on page 91. I think the one of the pieces of paper that was there in regard to the changes in parking is a change of recommendations. And I guess also the pothole thing you just said is also a change in recommendations. I think we understand the things that are being changed, but obviously the written recommendations will change, which I think Democratic Services Manager will kind of have his head around a bit. So what I'm going to do is ask for a confirmation subject to the changes that have been mentioned. I think that's, does that sound right to you, Catherine? So subject to we've had three key changes. We've had what's been tabled here on parking fees. We've had the comments on potholes. I'm going to ask Cabinet to approve subject to the amendment of those two. All right. Okay, let's confirm that then. So it's recommendations as written, plus the changes here tabled this evening, plus the 8:30 rather than 8 o'clock, plus 8:30 till 10:30 instead of 8 till 10. Absolutely. And then finally, the comment just made about potholes. So Cabinet, if I can just ask you, can you confirm, please, your agreement to those recommendations? Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. Okay, folks, we would normally take a break after about a couple of hours, so let's do that. If we may, just take sort of 5-10 minutes break. We still have a few reports. Let's look at whether we'd get all the way through, but I think we'd benefit from a break because we need to look at the housing revenue accounts, emissions report, decarbonisation schemes, recycling, and a couple of others as well. So can I suggest, look, it's 15:15. Can we be back about 25 past so we can be underway by past, please? Let me just check that clock. Actually, that clock is rather fast. So in actual fact, I make it 8 minutes past. Let's see if we can get back for about 20 past, get started at 25 past. Thank you. So we're going to move on to item 11. This is the housing revenue account budget for the coming year and medium-term financial plan. Malcolm will introduce in a moment, followed by which we have two speakers registered. That's Councillor Purser and Councillor Kilbride. Just looking around. He's left, hasn't he? Yeah, that's it. Okay, so just Councillor Purser, but let's first of all go to Malcolm for some introductory.
Yeah, fine. Thank you, Chair.
comments.
Well, there's not a huge amount to add here because this budget is because of the nature of it, it's a continuum. And as you'll see there, that really we covered most of the points, I think, in the earlier session. So I'm not going to say an awful lot here, other than it's probably the only item really that's of interest, really, and this is touching on Sally's point earlier, of on page 358 is just the right to buy sales by financial year, and there's a prediction of 57 this year, which is a lot lower than normal. So maybe it's going in a different direction. But other than that, the programs that are currently in being will continue, and but what is probably of significance is that there's a we've got a major review on this area because we want to make sure that the borrowing's in good order and the direction will be delivering enough houses and so on. So all those questions, and that's a major review underway, and that will that may well modify our budget as the year goes by, but we'll see what comes out of the review. So that's really the size of it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. One other thing, because I knew Adam was going to speak on this, but because it's so crucial and Adam runs all things housing, we pass over to Adam just to make a few comments before we then go over to Bob, if that's okay, Bob. Adam?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to highlight the salient points from a housing perspective, and clearly the budget delivers a capital budget that ensures that we can continue to deliver homes for social rent. But in fact, over the last 2 years, between MPH and our housing associations, we have seen the building of nearly 700 affordable or social rent homes in West Northamptonshire. This budget, draft budget before us today, sets out over the next 2 years the potential to build a further 258 social rent houses over those next 2 years. We've already noted the importance of, or the influence of right to buy. I think it's important to note that right to buy sales have yet to return to pre-pandemic levels, and we're expecting that demand on right to buy to remain fairly static over the next couple of years, given the increases to interest rates. The current borrowing limits that we've got have not reduced existing projects as set out at 6.10.7, but I wanted to highlight in particular the issues around the rent increase. As we touched on earlier, the 7% uplift in rents is essential to allow MPH to carry out a suitable maintenance regime and to pay its staff a competitive and fair wage. Whilst we have a capital programme to deliver new builds, it is only through the rental increases that we're able to keep pace with the increased costs of maintaining the current housing stock. Now, I promised at the December Cabinet meeting that I'd read the consultation comments carefully on this subject, and I've done so. It's clear from that the public want us to be mindful of the needs of those who are least well off. And I think we need to be mindful that in the consultation, it wasn't highlighted in any way that we were actually proposing to budget for a hardship fund within the HRA in the year ahead. Around 80% of tenants of MPH have their rent covered by universal credit, so they won't feel the effect of the 7% increase in the rent, although that rental income will still benefit NPH and WNC. However, that still leaves us with the other 20% or so of tenants who will have to find, if not for the hardship fund, around £30 a month extra in rent. And at a time when the cost of living crisis is really biting, that £30 a month is significant money to many families, which is why we have budgeted for a hardship fund which will directly target those 20% of tenants to reduce or mitigate the effect of that 7% uplift in rents. And that's all I've got to say at this point in time, Chairman.
That's great. Thank you, Adam. So Bob, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Adam for his comments, because that was the first point I was going to raise. This group of people who are going to be very adversely affected this year. And I suppose the question I would want to ask is, how much will this hardship fund be for each tenant? And how will we make sure it reaches them? And to recognise, I think I'm right in saying that this hardship will apply not only to our NPH tenants, but also those in housing association properties. And that seems to me a group who are kind of under the radar as far as we as an authority are, and slightly. So I welcome that announcement of recognition that this is going to be a problem and that there will be a hardship fund, but we need to make sure it gets to the people who really need it. And what about the housing association issues? The second point I've got is about the new building bit. And I know Malcolm's very concerned about the risks of borrowing, but I think for housing, given that it's a long-term issue, you know, many of us have mortgages or have had mortgages, and that is a good way of building or having your house paid for. And I would urge him to look at this as a healthy way of borrowing money, rather than, I recognise that you can have wrong borrowing, and goodness me, this county has lessons to learn from that. But I think as far as housing is concerned, then that's a healthy way of purpose for borrowing money. And I know that the economics are difficult and have to stack up, and the price of land and so on. But I think there is a place for borrowing. I think there's a place for our pension fund being involved in that we borrow money from our pension fund to invest in housing over the long term, and that can be done in a healthy, secure, and where there's a win-win for both the pension fund and for our local housing. So I urge you to look at how we borrow and make it as cost, because we've got, you know, I think we've gained about 1,000 people on the waiting list this year. It's shocking the scale of need that we have here, and you know, and 150 is a drop in the ocean compared with the need we have. So yes, those are my comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Chair, if I can indulge you, one further point, to welcome the proposals for Ecton Brook. I think a number of councillors are really pleased to see the proposals in the capital budget.
No, indeed, it's good for them to have been able to. We're very pleased. Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much. Any comments there that we want to come back on at all? Adam, you want to comment on a couple of things, I think.
Firstly, on Ecton Brook, I know that Councillor Holland Delamere, Councillors Hill, Clark and Kilbride have all passed on their thanks because we have been able to allocate land under the HRA to the potential construction of a community hub in Ecton Brook, and we look forward to progressing that in the near future. In terms of how much is available in the hardship fund, we're undertaking work to design the very fine detail of the hardship fund with MPH. They'll be communicating with tenants directly, those who they believe will be eligible. The Director for Communities and Opportunities may step in and correct me, but I believe that we've budgeted for £200,000 in total for that hardship fund. Now,
can I correct you there, Adam? If you look on page 353, 353, Bob, it's 908,000.
More than I was expecting, which is good news. So thank you, Malcolm.
On the page 908, additional tenant support.
On the other hand, you asked about the housing association tenants, because the HRA only applies to NPH. It is only for NPH tenants. However, you'll have seen, Councillor Purser, that WNC is offering a range of cost of living support facilities to residents whatever their household situation. So that includes a hardship fund, council tax relief, and various other measures, as well as those provided to us by central government. So there'll be a whole host of promotional activities around that range of support going out from our comms team over the weeks ahead. And I think we'd all appreciate councillors of all political colours sharing that promotional material so that their residents are aware of the support on offer via WNC.
Thank you, Adam. Malcolm, was there anything further you wanted to comment on this one?
A couple of points there, thanks, Chair, was first of all to make sure that Bob understood that we predicted this situation and, you know, we know what the current circumstances are, so that's a very substantial amount of money. And what is interesting there, and a point you made earlier, is that the hardship funds we've had in the past don't get much, don't show, hardly anybody takes them up, surprisingly. So it's worthy of note, yeah. Second thing was, I've never heard of a healthy way of borrowing, but I'll take that on board, Bob, thank you very much. And the other thing was, I thought that was an interesting idea about the pension fund, and I will definitely take that up with the pension fund. You should maybe talk to Catherine as well to make sure she's alive to that. And just for your information that today, and for everybody's knowledge, that you may recall that I always report on the side of where the pension fund stands. And the last time I reported, it was 120% covered, which is now we've got a meeting of the investment subcommittee taking place next week rather. And I can tell you that it'll be in the public domain that we'll be 135% covered. So there's plenty of cash there. It's a question of what we do with it. But I'll definitely take it up. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Now, Councillor Biz was originally down to speak on this and now decided she wants to go back on the list. So sorry, it's still not going on actually, Sally. There seems to be a bit.
It's flashing. I got it. I'm ever so sorry. I was meant to be quick and then it took longer. The hardship fund money, the form is quite difficult for people to fill in. And we have asked the 151 and Belinda Green if we can make it simpler for people to apply for the hardship fund. And they said they would have a look at it. And I think this is the reason why it isn't so much take up in it. It should be more taken up because people actually do need help at the moment. And we've just got to make it simpler for them to apply.
Fair enough. I'm sure we'll make it as simple as possible. I think it's something we've got better at, all the cost of living support as well, isn't it? Martin, I think you were going to make a comment on that.
Yeah, just to distinguish between the two different types of hardship funds. So the one in the HRA report is for rent hardship. The one that the council just referred to is referring to council tax hardship fund, and the take of that has been greater over the last 2 years. So in the first year, not many people did come forward. We've reissued the forms, we've re-promoted it, and many more people have taken it. But in the second year, we've still not totally used it, but the demand for it is greater.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, so what we're being, sorry, is that all the comments and questions on this one? So what we're being asked to do is a series of recommendations. We're being asked to recommend this to the full council to approve a number of the aspects that we have discussed in this report. Recommendations, of course, are at section 3. Can I just ask Cabinet to confirm their agreement? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, that takes us on to the West Northampton Council emissions report. A couple of comments on this. You'll know that we launched our sustainability strategy. It was around about this time last year. Some great progress since, and at 2.1 you'll see a list of the things we've done since the launch, mapping everything that we do against environmental, social and economic sustainability. Complete collection of the baseline data for our CO2e emissions. This is towards net zero rather than carbon neutral. We've also worked in embedding a culture of sustainability across the council, which I think is getting somewhere, including having run workshops with members, directors, assistant directors. Every directorate is focused on sustainability, with probably a lot of what we do having always been around social and economic sustainability, but without a doubt pressing the button harder on environmental. We have staff networks, we have a variety of other things. We're only being asked to note this report. If you look at the report itself, I think the key thing is that we believe that there's a role for us to take a community leadership role in this, but we cannot possibly do that unless we understand our own emissions. So we've used the tool as provided by the Local Government Association, which seems a very credible tool to calculate what those emissions are. Our targets are extremely bold. There's absolutely little doubt about that, but we see an urgency and importance around this, which we pick up from our residents. Subsequently makes it quite difficult to put an exact plan of what's going to happen on what day and what it's going to cost all the way through, because we're also in an evolving, this is an evolving challenge that people are finding more and more ways of tackling. In order to get that peer support, as well as Local Government Association and others, we've joined the UK 100, which is 100 or I think currently 86 of the most ambitious councils across the country. So we're looking to do all that we can. You'll see the report sets out in percentage terms where WNC's emissions come from and total net emissions. It also splits out a variety of interesting facts. So the majority of our emissions, 66%, fall within under our direct control. And if we're looking at what the council can do, I think that's you know, in many ways pretty satisfying. It's something we can do something about. Energy is one of our biggest sources of emissions. One large one, second significant source, is what are called fugitive emissions. That's 18.4%. And believe it or not, this comes from decommissioned landfill sites. So it just shows you how long you live with digging holes to bury rubbish in. And that will continue for quite some time. Okay, there's quite an awful lot of other information in here. We're asking the whole of West Northants now to start making pledges in terms of how they feel they can be more sustainable, particularly environmentally. We have not been able to really do that until we got our own house in order. And my belief is that this is what that report, what this report does. We have a couple of speakers, so I'll hand over to those. They are firstly Councillor Holland-Delamere, then Councillor Jonathan Harris. Keith, over to you first.
Speaking in part on behalf of a colleague who's been on a sustainability group.
Yeah.
They welcome the reports and acknowledge the hard work of the team. The council have been actually working on this report. They also welcome the transparency, especially with sharing the information to Climate Action West Northants and the work and the contribution they've done to this council. As our colleague Councillor McCord pointed out earlier, I think it's very much a lot of work for us to do in terms of aligning our budgets to this issue. And we've acknowledged it's going to take a long time to do that, but it's one of those ones where we need to do the pipeline projects, the retrofitting, even the new projects that we're building. We need to be thinking about actually, do we spend a little bit more on a project in order to put the green stuff in first, rather than having to come back to it in 5 years' time to retrofit it. That's really all I've got to say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Keith. Yep, Councillor Harris, and then we'll bring Councillor McCord in.
Thank you, Chair. I again would like to commend this piece of work and specifically thank Martin, Jolie, Felicity and Eugene for their efforts and energy as officers putting this particular piece of work together. It's not a small feat by any means. Of course, the key thing with this piece of work now is to ensure that it becomes embedded and that we continue to report effectively. And I know that that process has started to create that type of culture within the organisation, but there is still a lot more to do. It would be useful at some point to start ensuring that maybe we're setting targets, because at the moment we have a baseline data set. And at the moment, again, it's linked to the points just made by the previous speaker that we have a target for this particular council of 2030. And I know there are mixed views about that ambition. But if we are to hit that target, then we really need to seriously join up the dots collectively in terms of looking at budget decisions. They need to be aligned and interlinked very clearly. If I can refer to the graph in the document itself, I think on my page numbering, it's page 416. The graph really does show the focus and effort needed to get us to a net zero point. It refers to the fact that we need to be reducing councils' net CO2 equivalent emissions by 2,587 tonnes a year. That's a significant number. And you know that there are effectively 7 years left, almost not quite 7 years, probably 6.5. So it does show that we will really need to work quite hard to align budgets, capital investment also. And I hope that we can collectively continue to look out to see what other support and funding might be available for these schemes. As perhaps, if I can refer to the next item, as we see in the next item where we're looking at decarbonisation, there must be more funds there and we should be hunting them out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure that's right. Ian, Councillor McCord.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's time to put the case for the opposition. It's time for some honesty and time to end this lunacy of net zero, both nationally and here locally. I don't doubt the science. Man-made climate change is probably a thing. It's whether or not we see it as a danger or an issue to be managed, to me, is the real issue. So let's be honest, we will not hit this target simply because there is no budget of a sufficient size to do so. And even if there was a budget, there is no plan about how we go about to do it. There can be no plan as the technologies that we need to do it are not yet invented. This council has no costed plan to insulate every building, change the fleets, heat pumps, whatever all is necessary. A plan would also probably include combining smaller village schools, and I doubt there's a political appetite for that. We have the complete madness where green is the new religion. Anyone who dares speak against it will be treated like the heretics of the Dark Ages, burned and cancelled like witches were in the past. As a nation, we are responsible for, say, 1% of global emissions, a bit more if you measure by consumption. The major emitters, China, India, Russia, USA, have no plans to reduce their emissions and have not insanely passed laws to make net zero a legal requirement. At present, we're all kidding ourselves, bringing liquefied natural gas from the USA to help keep the lights on in Europe as the collective wisdom decided to go in hot to a mad dictator in Russia. It's the right thing to do to support Ukraine. But we have fracked gas from the USA shipped across the Atlantic, compressed and decompressed, all taking energy and not counting towards our emissions, as it's all done by accountancy tricks in the way these things get counted. We should frack our own gas here in the UK, get the cost down and have energy security for this country. When the wind does not blow or the sun does not shine, what will we do? We want to ban wood burning stoves locally, but import vast quantities of wood to feed the Drax power station in the north of England and call it renewable energy. I see little point in making us all poorer for no net gain. We can be responsible and put less pressure on our natural resources, but inflicting economic damage to ourselves locally and nationally to have little or no effect on global emissions is, in my view, utter madness and needs to be reviewed, both nationally and locally. It's not just, we're just following the crowd here. We need to stop following the crowd and actually look at this in a very sensible way and stop following the religion of net zero and actually ask, is this the right thing to do?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ian. We'll give you. Jonathan's going to give you. Is it? Yep. Okay. We'll make a couple of comments on that. Quick thing that Ian referenced there, incidentally, on wood burning stoves. We obviously have some, emissions problem areas. So, for example, in Northampton, we'll be familiar with the Cock Hotel area where it's impossible to develop some of the nearby buildings because of the, you can't put housing there because of the emissions. Sally knows about that from Kingsthorpe. We have other areas where we're watching emissions. We have some smokeless zones where we can only use smokeless fuel. What we found is a bit of government money to explore whether we should be expanding some of those. That's basically, I think, what's hit the news there. It's investigation. It's by no means done deal, but that's the point about wood burning stoves. And I'm grateful I had an opportunity to come up there. Sometimes you've got to get running on things if you believe it's the right thing to do without actually knowing what the full details are. I agree, Ian, it's scary and it's risky. And is it religion? I think it's something that a lot of us are sort of obsessed is the right thing to do. When you look around the world, you're quite right. In terms of what we can do, all we can influence is our little corner of the world. But that, I guess, is what we're determined to do. And in terms of budget, that probably says, given current situations, I don't think it's necessarily just about big chunks of money. There are some things that will be housing, which I think Keith referred to it, and indeed Ian. Housing with our own council houses, phenomenally costly for the work that's been done so far. We won some government money for some modifications, which many of you would have seen around the St David's area of Kingsthorpe, and incredibly expensive per house. We have to rely on that technology getting better and better and cheaper in a real hurry. So that's the biggest bit that worries me, is the housing. Meantime, we have got a variety of things. So not just more solar on top of Angel Square for our own needs, which is something already budgeted for, but bigger solar projects that are planned, changes with our own fleet of vehicles in due course. The next item is, as you say, decarbonisation on swimming pool heating. They use huge energies at leisure centres. It's an £8 million project, although only a small part of that is ours because of the government funding. Looking out for more funding is really, really important. One of the great things is that as a result of the team that we now have, resident schemes, we are absolutely on the front foot of. So that although they contribute to our 2045 target, residents in terms of schemes that will improve the insulation and so on in their own home, for the first time, we're really at the front foot of. In fact, we're likely to run out the money allocated to us and perhaps use the allocations that would have been available to other councils who have failed to act on them. So we are in a better position to spot funding that's available. With highways, with a new contractor, we're now engaging properly with a major focus on sustainability, because there's quite a lot of emissions can come as a result, but we're determined to reduce them as far as is possible through initiatives like electric vehicles and various changes to their methods. So I think it's not a panacea, and it's going to be really, really, really hard work. What we have done here, though, is we've identified what our own emissions are, not just carbon, but across many gases. And what we're asking Cabinet to do under Section 3 is to note the progress towards the commitment, which was to publish the emissions levels, and then note the commitment to net zero emission levels. So if I may, does anybody have any further questions, by the way? Any comments or? No. Okay. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement to those recommendations? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Takes us on to one we just mentioned, the decarbonisation, rural leisure centres, item 13. In a moment, Adam's going to introduce item 13. We have two speakers, Councillors Randall and Harris. Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. And air source heat pumps were just got a mention, and lo and behold, here they are. This is largely a government-funded scheme. West Northampton Council is required to put forward at least 12% of the project's cost. So the cost to the council will be £965,000. Central government providing the other just over £7 million. Now, this will allow us to invest in our rural leisure centres, Daventry, Brackley, Towcester and Moulton, and replace end-of-life heating systems with air source heat pumps. It saves money for the operator, and it saves on carbon emissions. Now, over the course of time, those savings for the contractor will hopefully result in increased management fee income for West Northamptonshire Council. For anyone thinking the routine question of what about Northampton, well, we have the Mounts Baths, which recently had an investment in a new heating system. Danes Camps heating system is not end of life, and of course we're still hoping and praying that in future levelling up funds we get the requisite investment from central government to be able to demolish Lings Forum, which means of course that for the time being we're not going to spend money on installing a new heating system there. I think it is right that as Conservatives we seek to conserve our environment and improve the world for those around us. And I think this is a really positive project that I look forward to seeing progress.
Jolly good. Thank you, Adam. Let's move to our speakers then. As I say, first speaker is, where are we? Oh, Wendy, Councillor Randall. Over to you, Wendy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Anything that's good for the environment, is a good idea. I just wondered whether there was anything that we could get out of this at all. You did say that there's going to be some cost savings, and just looking across those 3 leisure centres for swimming, they're quite different. Brackley and Toaster seem to do like morning and afternoon sessions, and they do a family swim. But Daventry and Moulton, they seem to be saying that it's just a 1-hour session. That's really difficult actually to try and, if you're a family, to try and get yourselves in the pool and out the pool, and you've only got an hour. So first of all, I would like to see go back to morning and afternoon session, and whether there will be scope for any free swimming at all from their cost savings. Because I noticed that schools, obviously swimming comes out of a school budget. So schools are struggling to maintain that. And I do not want to see that we've got, it's okay. She's fed up with me, isn't she?
I think we're on about 30 quid for the charity so far, Rebecca. Thank you. Sorry, Wendy, back to you.
Maybe that was just at the right point. Yeah, so I was just wondering, if there will be any scope for any free swimming out of the savings that they would make. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. Our next, Councillor Harris. Jonathan, over to you. We can't promise you the same fanfare as we gave Wendy there.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I welcome this. It's obviously very good news, particularly given that the vast majority of this has been funded. So I think it signals that there is money and funding available. I think we need to be very on the mark to make sure that we access it frequently and often. Just to pick up Councillor McCord's point, yes, of course, there's a question, an issue about investment. There always will be. And that's precisely why we need to be looking out to look in on this particular issue. And Councillor McCord, I'm sure you can be assured that you're not going to be cancelled anytime soon. Arguably, there's a net zero risk of that. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any comments that you wanted to comment back on there, Adam?
Yeah, just in response to Councillor Harris, absolutely agree that we need to be on the lookout for any and all investment, which is why we were proactive in seeking out the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. We're one of the first pilots in the country to be able to undertake that work locally, and we're continuing to pursue other lines of investment across various portfolios within the council. Councillor Randall, I can't resist the party political pop. The leader of the Labour Party sees some money being saved and instantly wants to go out and spend it somewhere else. But I'll let that slide. It is a very, very difficult time for leisure centres across the country. On a serious point now, there are numerous local authorities who are being forced to close their leisure centres. We're not in that position in West Northamptonshire, and will continue not to be in that position so long as we do everything we can to work with the leisure centre operators to make sure that we can help them manage their financial exposure. This is part of that. In the long term, by upgrading these 4 leisure centres, it will make them more attractive when we do go out to the tender for new contracts. But in the short term, the contractors do need to save money wherever possible to continue being able to deliver the services that they're delivering at this moment in time. So no freebies, I'm afraid, but let's celebrate the fact that we're at least saving on our carbon emissions and saving some money into the bargain.
Thanks, Adam. Any other comments at all on this one? Okay, great. In which case, recommendation at section 3, we're being asked to note the inclusion of this in the capital programme and authorise the procurement and so on to commence. Can I ask you to confirm your agreement to those recommendations? Is that agreed? Thank you. That takes us on to item 14. This one is with Phil, contract for dry mixed recycling. So we'll go over to Phil in a second. Then we have just one speaker, which is Councillor Randall. Phil, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Relatively straightforward. At the moment, there's several contracts for the collection and sorting of mixed recycling across West Northamptonshire. The contract for the haulage and sorting of recycling from the Daventry area comes to an end on the 3rd of June. And we need to resolve how we're going to deal with that further going forward. The south area comes to an end on the 6th of February 24. So it was intended that we'd perhaps look at getting a contract extension and then having a new contract from when the south area ceases in February next year. But the prices we're being quoted for a sort of temporary arrangement are prohibitive and would have significant impact on our budget for this coming year. We therefore want to go out to tender for a contract in several stages, if you like, a contract that will pick up the Daventry waste as from June, but we'll also pick up the south areas from February. It's a bit of a stepped contract, if you like, but taking that on board. The Northampton contract doesn't come to an end. It's all part of the Veolia contract, doesn't come to an end until 2028, but we will also seek to ensure that if necessary in 2028, that this new contract could encompass the Northampton recycling material as well. So basically, Chair, it's getting a contract that saves us money this year, this coming year, on the any temporary arrangements between June and February, but will give us a fair contract across the Daventry and South area with options for the Northampton area in the future. So happy to present the report and the recommendations therein.
Thank you, Phil. So one speaker on this, which is Wendy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a little bit more understanding that I wanted, really. So when the waste collectors collect the dry mixed recycling, does then a company come in and pick it up from them? Right, okay. So, and then I assume that probably we would look at having the same company to do the whole contract in time will be. So whoever gets this, the chances are, if they're good in that first year, it will go on to deliver. So there won't be any extra costs for anybody with fuel transporting it any further than if they actually come in and pick it up. So it's just my understanding of how that worked, really. Thank you.
I can assure Councillor Randall that yes, while it will initially be a contract for Daventry, it will take on board the waste from the south area in February next year, with options with regard to Northampton when that comes up for renewal in 2028. So yeah, it will be one contract.
Any further comments or questions on this one? No, okay, in which case recommendation section 3 is about approving the recommendation to commence the procurement with the director and the portfolio holder overseeing that. Can I just ask you to confirm your agreement? Is that agreed? That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Takes us on to item 15, which is public health, integrated sexual health service. This one is with Matt. Following which, Matt, we have one speaker, Councillor Randall. I might make a couple of comments actually after your introduction, by way of introduction as well, but Matt, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So I'll try and be brief. So this report provides a summary information on the progress of the integrated approach for sexual health and HIV services and options for the future arrangement of them. Current contract commenced on the 1st of April 2019. It's due to expire at the end of March this year. Service currently covers both North and West Northamptonshire areas, and the provider is Northamptonshire Healthcare Foundation Trust, or NHFT. Contracts has an extension clause with an option of 2 years, which would subsequently end the contract on the 31st of March 2025. An option appraisal found that the extension of the existing service will be the most cost-effective and clinically beneficial option in the current scenario. Extending the contract for a further 2 years would incur a total cost to us, WNC, of £5.1 million. This allows an uninterrupted delivery of the mandated sexual health service and mitigates clinical risk and wider wellbeing implications to the population. There's an interesting section on the report on performance around the contract, which highlights some areas of good performance and other areas of concern that we need to concentrate on as we move forward. During a period of extension, a full review of need will be carried out, and further work to consider the options of future delivery and procurement of these services will be made. This is a very important service and represents a large amount of money, as outlined at the table of section 7, which amounts to about 20 odd million pounds over 2 years. So it's a huge amount of money, and moving forward, I'm really keen that we get a real understanding of the performance management to make sure we're getting value for money from a system point of view as well. And I know you, Jonathan, have taken a keen interest in this. I'll just hand back to you to talk about the Terence Higgins Trust.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Matt. Only to say that whilst this is a continuation of a very similar service, there's an exciting opportunity on the horizon. Working closely with Terence Higgins Trust, learned rather more about their proposal for opt-out testing. We are in West Northampton considered an area of high prevalence of HIV. That means we have more than 2 cases per 1,000 population. Not the highest, but still rated high. Pilot scheme has been undertaken, but it didn't include us, included London and some of the very high areas. And we're currently lobbying the government in order to ensure that that can be extended to us, really. The aims of this project are quite ambitious. And for those of you who've had less contact, perhaps remember the initial Tombstone adverts back in the 80s, which were very scary. The aim of this project is to end new HIV transmissions by 2030. It's quite incredible to think that's possible, but it is. But the only way of doing that is in ensuring that we pick up far more undiagnosed cases. What this would involve is at such time as blood tests are undertaken, in addition to the other things that are being looked for, the blood will be tested for HIV. That just enables somebody who wasn't aware of their own diagnosis to become medicated, and that can prevent the spread. It's quite incredible what the medication can do. Simply what we're seeking to do, and we have a letter which will be going to the government tomorrow, will be to say, please, we're ready and waiting. Delighted that the Director of Public Health has worked with the health services to ensure their enthusiasm to do this too. We think it won't be a colossal amount of money required, but it's money that covers the laboratory charges for the blood tests, and we hope to be extending that too. We wanted to make that commitment publicly because we're telling the government that we're publicly ready, willing and eager to undertake this. Thank you very much. At that point, we have one speaker, which is Wendy, Councillor Randall. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, appreciate what you've just said. And in one box, I was a bit confused because it says HIV late diagnosis in people first diagnosed with HIV in the UK. I couldn't get my head around those words, so I think it may be just me. So late diagnosis in people with first diagnosis. So I just need a bit more understanding around that.
What's the paragraph number there, just Wendy?
Oh,
Just make
it's
sure.
on page 413, and it's the second little box down.
Okay, a quick look at that while you're finishing your points.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. And like you say, it's a huge contract, and I would have expected us to be looking closely at those trends. So we've got the chlamydia worsening trend, although the screening is higher. So maybe we're lacking in education. And then the total abortion rate, increasing rate with worsening trend over the past 5 years. Under 18 conception rate is improving, that's good. But under 18 conception leading to abortion, no significant change. So for the amount of that contract, I would have expected to see improvements, not worsening. So for me, you know, for that huge amount of money that we're paying, you know, it is a concern. So how are we going to make sure that we are continuously tracking that and make sure those trends from now on go in the right direction? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Matt, Stuart, did you want to respond? Either of you, both of you, perhaps?
Yeah, this is a mandated service and we have to expect that it's going to be working towards improving outcomes for the people that come into contact with the service. Going back to Wendy's first point, it is about people that are diagnosed later in the disease. I think that figure she was referring to. So, and I don't disagree with the points Wendy made there. It is a huge amount of money, as we've mentioned a couple of times. And I think whether it's something we could look at with at scrutiny or the Health and Wellbeing Board, but certainly I'll be taking a keen interest in how we're, you know, trying to force change and improve all the outcomes for people that have to use this service, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments on this one at all? No? Okay, the recommendations are at section 3. Basically are regarding extending the current contract with NHS England for the period stated. Can I ask you to confirm your agreement to the recommendations? Is agreed? Thank you. That's great. Takes us on to our final report, which is the West Northamptonshire Council primary and secondary coordinated schemes for 2024 intakes. This one is with Fiona. Fiona will introduce it in a second. Then again, we have one speaker, Councillor Wendy Randall. So Fiona, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. This paper is something that I think all of our members should keep in their back pocket because in detail, it goes through every scenario that you could come across with a resident might ask you about their child's school places. Everything is listed there that we need to know for the future. So I think it's a valuable document that we should all keep when somebody comes and says they want to change schools midterm, they want to do all those different things. They're all laid out in this particular document. This is last month I brought forward the actual logistics of how they were going to work the system now that we are fully independent in West Northamptonshire for school admissions. And this is the backstory that goes with last month's paper. And I have put forward that in the future, both papers come at the same time because they are related and closely in contact with each other. So it doesn't make sense to have them on separate months, really. So there isn't really anything else to say about this other than my watch is telling me it's nearly bedtime. I've just think it's just got all of the information that anybody would need about children's admission into schools and the placements, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's it really, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Wendy, some comments from you?
Thank you, Chair. It almost covers every scenario, but it doesn't cover a scenario that I asked you about at the last cabinet meeting. And that was where a child might reside in another family member's home for, say, the school part of the week, if their parents are working shift work or something like that, because it actually says that it has to be the parent owned, the home owned by the parents. So if it was a grandparent that had that child during the week, while the parents might do shift work or nurses or whatever, then my way of reading, they would not be able to put down that grandparent's home, even though they were residing there in the school week, which might make it extremely difficult if they're outside a catchment area or they've got 2 children to, it could become difficult. So it's, so even though they may not live the majority time with the parents, because that's what it says like on a, you know, but it just doesn't cover that scenario, and it may have that one come up.
Stuart Odier.
Thank you. So at 2.2 of the 2.20, sorry, of the document, it identifies that the child's home address is defined as the address at which the child normally resides with their parent stroke carer. So if you take carer to describe a grandparent, then the essence is on about determining where the normal place of the child resides. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Wendy. Okay, this is relatively straightforward, I think, but does anybody have any other queries on this one at all? Questions? No? Okay, it's simply run past us as it needs to be, and the idea is to approve it. Can I just confirm your agreement to the recommendations? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you for everybody who's put the huge work in. I think special thanks to the finance team particularly for everything they've done, and for all of our speakers this evening. We're grateful for your comments. Thank you.